I inherited a wasteland and accidentally built a civilization. Volume 4, The Gathering Storm. Ashfall is no longer a forgotten wasteland. Its schools, clinics, roads, workshops, markets, and honest government have transformed it into the greatest frontier territory in the kingdom. Merchants, scholars, craftsmen, and settlers continue to arrive, hoping to become part of the miracle that Cedric and the Council of Ashfall created. But prosperity attracts more than opportunity. Across the kingdom, powerful noble houses begin to fear Ashfall's growing influence. They cannot understand why commoners are abandoning wealthy territories to settle in a frontier domain led by a young lord who refuses corruption and noble privilege. Among those watching from the shadows are Cedric's own brothers. What began as envy slowly becomes suspicion. What begins as suspicion slowly becomes ambition. Believing Cedric is becoming a threat to the family's future, his brothers secretly begin building factions within House Valmont. At first, they use rumors, political manipulation, and economic sabotage. However, their rivalry gradually evolves into a dangerous struggle for inheritance and power, drawing them into conflict not only with Cedric, but with one another. Meanwhile, Ashfall faces new challenges. Refugees fleeing corrupt territories seek sanctuary. Criminal organizations attempt to infiltrate the flourishing markets. Foreign merchants try to monopolize trade. Hidden enemies test Ashfall's defenses, searching for weaknesses. Cedric realizes that rebuilding a wasteland was only the beginning. Now, he must protect everything they have built. And somewhere within House Valmont, the first seeds of civil war have already been planted. Chapter 1, The Calm After Victory. Morning sunlight bathed Ashfall in a warm golden glow. Smoke rose peacefully from the chimneys. The marketplace was already bustling with merchants preparing their stalls. Children hurried toward the school with books tucked beneath their arms. The rhythmic ringing of hammers echoed from the workshop. For the first time in many years, Ashfall looked like a place where people truly lived, not merely survived. Cedric Valmont stood atop the balcony of the council hall, quietly watching the town awaken. A gentle breeze brushed past him. Behind him came familiar footsteps. "You've been standing here since sunrise." Cedric smiled without turning around. "I couldn't sleep." Greta walked beside him and leaned against the wooden railing. "Thinking again. When am I not?" She laughed softly. "Fair point." Below them, the streets were alive. A little girl waved toward Cedric. "Good morning, Lord Cedric." He waved back. "Good morning." Several craftsmen paused their work just long enough to greet him. Farmers transporting vegetables into town tipped their hats. Travelers entering through the gates smiled in admiration. No one bowed because they were afraid. They bowed because they respected him. Greta noticed. "They really love you." Cedric shook his head. "They love Ashfall." The council hall slowly filled as the members arrived. Merchant Oswald carried a stack of reports. Farmer Hugo arrived with muddy boots after inspecting the fields before dawn. Dr. Miriam looked slightly exhausted after delivering a baby during the night. Teacher Elena entered with several letters from neighboring villages. Finally, Master Rowan burst through the doors carrying an enormous wooden crate. Greta frowned. "Should I ask?" "No. It'll be more fun." The weekly council meeting began. Oswald stood first. "Our trade has doubled since spring. 3 new merchant caravans have requested permanent routes. The market has become the busiest in the frontier." Farmer Hugo smiled. "The harvest also looks excellent. The new irrigation channels are working perfectly." Dr. Miriam added. "The clinic treated fewer serious illnesses this month. People are healthier than ever." Teacher Elena adjusted her glasses. "We welcomed 32 new students this week. The classrooms are nearly full." Master Rowan proudly folded his arms. "My apprentices finished rebuilding the Eastern Bridge." Greta sighed. "You rebuilt another bridge without telling anyone." "I wanted it to be a surprise." Everyone laughed. For a brief moment, it felt like there would never be another crisis. Then, a knock echoed through the hall. A royal messenger entered. His crimson cloak immediately silenced the room. He respectfully bowed. "I bring letters from the capital." Cedric accepted the sealed documents. Each bore the crest of a different noble house. Another carried the royal seal itself. Greta frowned. "That's unusual." Cedric quietly agreed. "It is." After the messenger departed, Teacher Elena looked concerned. "So many letters." Merchant Oswald's expression darkened. "They've noticed us." No one asked what he meant. Everyone already understood. Ashfall was no longer hidden. The kingdom was watching. That afternoon, Cedric walked alone through the marketplace. He stopped to help an elderly woman carry her groceries. Visited the school to congratulate several students. Shared bread with builders repairing a nearby fountain. Checked on patients recovering inside the clinic. To everyone else, it seemed like an ordinary day. But Cedric couldn't ignore the strange feeling growing in his chest. The peaceful days felt fragile. Far away, within the grand estate of House Valmont, several noble carriages arrived one after another. Brothers who had not gathered together in years stepped from their carriages. Each greeted the others politely. Each smiled. None trusted one another. Inside the manor, a servant quietly announced, "Young Lord Cedric will not be attending today's family gathering." The eldest brother slowly sipped his tea. Even when absent, he remains the topic of every conversation. Silence settled over the room. Another brother finally spoke. "They say Ashfall is flourishing. They say commoners praise him more than nobles praise us." A third brother clenched his fist beneath the table. "He was sent to die in that wasteland. So why is everyone talking about him?" No one answered, but the seed of envy had already begun to grow. Back in Ashfall, the evening bells echoed across the town. Children laughed while running home. Merchants closed their stalls. The workshop fires slowly dimmed. Cedric looked toward the distant horizon. He smiled, unaware that beyond those mountains, the first storm was already gathering. Chapter 2, Fame Across the Kingdom. 3 days had passed since the royal messengers arrived. Ashfall had continued as usual. At least, that was what everyone wanted to believe. The marketplace opened at sunrise. The school bell rang. The clinic received patients. The craftsmen worked. But something had changed. More travelers were arriving, and they weren't simply passing through. They were coming to see Ashfall. The first caravan. Just after breakfast, a long line of wagons appeared beyond the eastern road. Greta stood at the town gate with her arms crossed. "That's the third caravan this morning." Merchant Oswald looked over the arriving wagons. "Fourth." Greta frowned. "Why are they coming?" Oswald smiled faintly. "Because people are talking." The caravan stopped at the gate. Its leader climbed down from the driver's seat. He wore expensive clothes and carried documents stamped with a merchant guild seal. "I'm looking for Lord Cedric." Greta sighed. "Everyone is." The merchant looked surprised. "Is that a problem?" "No." She glanced toward the growing line behind him. "It just means he's going to have a very long day." The stories. The merchants had heard countless stories about Ashfall. That its roads were better than roads near the capital. That its market used honest weights. That its clinic treated anyone who needed help. That children from poor families could attend school. That craftsmen trained apprentices without demanding impossible fees. That the council allowed ordinary people to speak. Some stories were exaggerated. Some were completely wrong. But enough were true. That people wanted to see the place for themselves. Cedric finally arrived at the gate. He looked at the line of caravans. Then at Oswald. "Why?" Oswald smiled. "Congratulations." "For what?" "You've become famous." Cedric stared at him. "I didn't ask to." "Nobody does." A scholar's visit. The next visitor wasn't a merchant. She was a scholar from the Royal Academy. She spent nearly an hour examining the road system. Then another hour inside the school. Then she visited the clinic. Finally, she approached Cedric. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Who designed your administrative system?" Cedric pointed toward the council hall. "The council." She looked surprised. "All of them?" "Yes. And you?" "I have one vote." The scholar stared at him. "Only one." Cedric nodded. She immediately began writing. The children notice. At school, the students had begun hearing the rumors too. Milo proudly told his classmates. "My village is famous." Lily corrected him. "It's not a village anymore." Milo blinked. "What is it?" Teacher Elena smiled. "That's a good question." Outside the classroom, a group of visiting scholars watched the children study. One asked, "Did they really receive lessons without paying tuition?" Teacher Elena nodded. "Yes." "And meals?" "Yes." "Books?" "Yes." The scholar looked toward the classroom. "Who funds all of this?" Teacher Elena smiled. "The community." The first problem. By afternoon, the growing number of visitors created a problem. The inns were full. The guesthouses were full. Even several private homes were taking travelers in. Greta walked into the council hall looking exhausted. We need more lodging. Master Rowan immediately raised his hand. I can build it. Greta pointed at him. Don't say it. Rowan lowered his hand. Fine. Cedric laughed. We'll discuss it tomorrow. The noble carriage. Near sunset, a black carriage entered Ashfall. Unlike the merchant caravans, this one carried no trade goods. Its doors bore the crest of a powerful noble family. The guards at the gate immediately straightened. A finely dressed man stepped out. He looked around carefully. At the marketplace, the school, the roads, the people, his expression remained unreadable. Cedric approached. Welcome to Ashfall. The nobleman bowed politely. Lord Cedric, you know me. The man smiled. Everyone knows you now. Cedric didn't like the way he said it. A proposal. The nobleman introduced himself as Lord Adrian Vane. He represented one of the kingdom's oldest noble houses. I have come with a proposal. Cedric listened. We would like to establish a permanent commercial partnership with Ashfall. Oswald's expression immediately became cautious. What kind of partnership? Exclusive trade rights. Silence. Cedric's smile disappeared. Exclusive. For certain luxury goods. Adrian nodded. It would make Ashfall extremely wealthy. Cedric shook his head. No. The nobleman looked surprised. You haven't heard the full proposal. I've heard enough. Cedric turned toward the marketplace. Our market belongs to everyone. No single house will control it. Adrian's smile became thinner. I see. Watching. After Lord Adrian left, Oswald approached Cedric. You made the right decision. Cedric nodded. Did you know his family? Everyone in the capital knows them. Oswald lowered his voice. They have a habit of buying influence wherever they go. Cedric looked toward the road. So they came because of Ashfall. Yes. Greta crossed her arms. That's one problem. Cedric looked at her. What? She pointed toward the horizon. Look. Several more caravans were arriving. Behind them, a group of riders. Then another carriage. And another. Ashfall's eastern road had become a river of visitors. The Royal Academy. That same evening, a letter arrived from the Royal Academy. The Academy formally requested permission to send researchers to Ashfall. The council members stared at the letter. Master Rowan whistled. We're becoming important. Greta sighed. That's exactly what worries me. Cedric looked at the letter carefully. Why? She answered honestly. Because people don't fight over places they don't care about. Everyone became quiet. The capital. Far away. In the capital, the Royal Council discussed Ashfall. A minister placed several reports on the table. Trade has increased. Another added. Population has doubled. A third spoke. 3 noble houses have already requested commercial agreements. The king quietly read the reports. Then asked one question. And Lord Cedric? The minister hesitated. He rejected 2 exclusive trade proposals. The king smiled. Good. But not everyone in the room smiled. One nobleman slowly leaned back. Your Majesty. Yes. Perhaps Ashfall is becoming too independent. The king looked toward him. Or perhaps, the rest of the kingdom has simply forgotten what good governance looks like. No one answered. House Valmont. That night, another report arrived at the Valmont estate. The eldest brother read it carefully. Ashfall's trade increases by 37%. He read the number again. Another report followed. Royal Academy requests access to Ashfall's institutions. Then another. 3 noble houses seek partnership with Lord Cedric. His expression darkened. One of his brothers entered. You saw the reports. Yes. He has become more influential than expected. The eldest brother closed the documents. Not influential. He looked toward the window. Visible. Another brother entered. What difference does that make? The eldest brother answered quietly. Everything. A new reputation. The next morning, a child ran through the marketplace shouting. People from the capital are coming. Merchants laughed. Farmers smiled. Craftsmen welcomed the visitors. Ashfall continued working. But beneath the excitement, Cedric felt something he couldn't explain. The kingdom was no longer ignoring Ashfall. It was watching, studying, measuring, waiting. That evening, Cedric stood once again on the council hall balcony. The same place where he had stood after the victory of Volume 3. The town below was brighter than ever. More people, more lights, more life. Yet this time, he couldn't simply enjoy the view. Greta joined him. You're thinking again. Cedric smiled faintly. People are coming from everywhere. That's good. It is. He looked toward the distant mountains. But why do I feel like we've just stepped onto a much bigger stage? Greta didn't answer. Because she felt it too. Far beyond Ashfall, a messenger carried a sealed letter toward House Valmont. Inside were only 3 words. Ashfall is rising. And for the first time, Cedric's brothers understood that his success was no longer merely a family matter. It was becoming a political one. Chapter 3, The Brothers Reunite. The Valmont estate had never felt so quiet. Despite the grand halls, polished marble floors, and countless servants moving through the manor, there was an uncomfortable tension in the air. Tonight, the sons of House Valmont had been summoned. All of them. For the first time in years, they would sit at the same table. And everyone knew why. The family gathering. The eldest son arrived first. He entered the dining hall wearing an immaculate black formal coat. His expression was calm, controlled. He took his seat at the head of the family table. A few minutes later, the second brother arrived. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each greeted the others politely. None of them smiled sincerely. Finally, a servant entered. Young Lord Cedric will not be attending. The room became silent. The eldest brother slowly lifted his wine glass. He wasn't invited. The servant lowered his head. Yes, my lord. The eldest brother smiled faintly. Then why does everyone keep mentioning him? No one answered. The reports. A thick stack of documents was placed on the table. Trade reports. Population reports. Royal Academy correspondence. Tax projections. Merchant requests. Political letters. Every report concerned the same territory. Ashfall. The second brother picked one up. A wasteland. He laughed softly. That's what father called it. The third brother glanced at the figures. That wasteland now produces more trade than some of our established territories. The fourth brother frowned. Impossible. It's documented. He pushed the report across the table. The fourth brother read it. His expression slowly changed. Cedric's success. The eldest brother remained silent. He had already read every report. Ashfall's population was growing. Its roads were attracting merchants. Its market was becoming famous. The Royal Academy wanted access to its school. Travelers were settling there permanently. Even the king had begun receiving regular reports about Cedric's administration. The youngest son, the son everyone expected to disappear, had become one of the most talked about young lords in the kingdom. The second brother finally spoke. How did he do it? The third shrugged. Luck. The fourth shook his head. Not entirely. Everyone looked toward him. He continued. He built systems. The council. The market. The school. The clinic. The craftsman's guild. He didn't simply make money. He made people depend on Ashfall. Silence. That observation made everyone uncomfortable. The question. The eldest brother placed his glass down. Do you know what father said when Cedric was sent there? Nobody answered. He said Cedric would either die or become irrelevant. His fingers tightened around the glass. Instead, he became influential. The second brother leaned back. Influential enough to threaten us. The eldest brother looked at him. Not yet. The word yet hung heavily in the room. The Valmont name. The third brother frowned. Our family's position hasn't changed. The eldest brother shook his head. It has. He pointed toward the reports. People aren't talking about House Valmont. They're talking about Cedric. The fourth brother's expression darkened. He's using the family name. No. The eldest brother's voice became colder. That's the problem. He isn't. Everyone understood. Cedric had built Ashfall without relying heavily on House Valmont. He had created his own reputation. His own network. His own influence. If he continued, he might eventually become powerful enough to stand independently from the family. An unexpected question. The second brother suddenly asked. If Cedric becomes more popular than all of us, what happens to the succession? The room went silent. The eldest brother slowly looked toward him. That depends on father. But what if father changes his mind? Nobody spoke. That possibility had never been discussed openly. Until now. Jealousy. The fourth brother suddenly laughed. This is ridiculous. Everyone looked at him. We're sitting here worrying about a boy who was sent to a wasteland. He stood. Let him play Lord. He'll eventually fail. The third brother quietly replied. What if he doesn't? The fourth brother stopped. The question lingered. What if Cedric didn't fail? What if Ashfall continued growing? What if the king continued noticing him? What if the people began seeing him as something more than a minor noble? What if Cedric eventually became the most influential Valmont son? A letter from the king. A servant suddenly entered. My lords. He carried a sealed document. The royal palace has sent an official letter. The eldest brother accepted it. He broke the seal. His eyes moved across the page. Then stopped. The second brother noticed. What does it say? The eldest brother slowly placed the letter on the table. The king has requested Cedric's presence at the capital. Everyone stared. The third brother smiled. So the king is interested in him. Apparently. The fourth brother clenched his jaw. Why? The eldest brother answered quietly. Because Ashfall is becoming important. The first alliance. After the meeting ended, the brothers separated into smaller groups. The third brother remained behind. He approached the second. You know this changes things. The second brother nodded. We need to know where Cedric stands. He's our brother. The second brother smiled faintly. Exactly. Across the corridor, the fourth brother spoke privately with one of his father's senior retainers. How much influence does Cedric have among the frontier nobles? More than expected. And among the common people? The retainer hesitated. Considerable. The fourth brother's expression hardened. Find out why. The eldest brother. The eldest remained alone in the dining hall. He looked once more at the reports. At the center of the pile was a simple document. Ashfall, 5-year projection. The numbers were extraordinary. Population growth, trade growth, agricultural expansion, craft production, tax revenue, all increasing. He slowly folded the report. Then whispered, Cedric. For the first time, there was no amusement in his voice. Only uncertainty. Meanwhile, in Ashfall, Cedric knew none of this. He was standing inside the workshop. Master Rowan was showing him a new machine. We call it the grain separator. Cedric examined it. Does it work? Rowan smiled. Sometimes. Cedric stared. Sometimes. We're still improving it. Nearby, the apprentices laughed. Cedric smiled. Keep working on it. Later, Cedric walked through the marketplace. He greeted merchants, checked the roads, visited the school, stopped by the clinic. Nothing felt different. Yet somewhere far away, his family had begun seeing him differently. Not as the useless youngest son. Not as the boy sent to a wasteland. But as a potential rival. That night, Cedric received the king's letter. He read it twice, then looked toward the council. Greta frowned. You're going to the capital. Cedric nodded. Apparently. Oswald looked worried. Why would the king suddenly summon you? Cedric folded the letter. I don't know. Greta crossed her arms. I don't like it. Cedric smiled. Neither do I. Far away, the eldest Valmont brother stood before a window overlooking the dark estate. His younger brothers had already begun choosing sides. He knew what came next. The family had always competed. But competition had rules. Jealousy had none. And for the first time, the brothers were no longer simply competing for father's approval. They were beginning to compete for the future of House Valmont itself. Chapter 4, Seeds of Envy. The morning after the family gathering, House Valmont was already moving. Servants carried documents between offices. Messengers rode toward neighboring territories. Nobles arrived for private meetings. Behind the polished walls of the estate, something had changed. The brothers were no longer simply watching Cedric. They were beginning to measure him. The eldest son's decision. The eldest brother sat inside his study. Cedric's reports were spread across the desk. Ashfall's population, its trade, its roads, its agricultural output, its growing relationship with the Royal Academy. He had read them so many times that he knew the numbers by heart. His advisor stood nearby. Do you believe Lord Cedric intends to challenge the family? The eldest brother shook his head. No. Then why are you concerned? He looked toward the window. Because he doesn't have to intend anything. The advisor frowned. The eldest brother continued. Power attracts people. People create alliances. Alliances create influence. And influence eventually becomes political power. He slowly closed the report. Cedric may not want the throne. But the kingdom may eventually want him near it. The second brother. Elsewhere, the second brother met with several young nobles. They were members of families that had supported House Valmont for generations. Wine filled their glasses. Laughter filled the room. But the conversation was serious. One nobleman leaned forward. Is it true Ashfall rejected Lord Vane's trade agreement? The second brother nodded. Yes. Why? Because Cedric refuses exclusive contracts. The nobles exchanged glances. One smiled. Interesting. Another laughed. He has principles. The second brother smiled. Principles can be useful. But beneath the table, his fingers tightened. He knew exactly what was happening. Cedric was becoming admired not because he was powerful, but because he refused to use power selfishly. And that made him difficult to attack. The third brother chose a different path. He began asking questions, not about Cedric, about Ashfall. Who controlled its trade? Who supplied its food? Who managed its roads? Who trained its craftsmen? Who served on the council? Which families had settled there? Who had influence over Cedric? He wanted to understand the structure behind the success. His personal secretary eventually returned with a thick folder. These are the names we found. The third brother opened it. He read carefully. Greta, Oswald, Miriam, Elena, Rowan, Hugo, and dozens of others. Ordinary people. People without noble titles. People Cedric trusted. The third brother frowned. He surrounded himself with commoners. The secretary hesitated. Yes. The third brother smiled. Then that's his weakness. The fourth brother wasn't interested in reports. He wanted action. He met secretly with several knights who had served House Valmont for years. How many soldiers could you gather? The captain looked uncomfortable. Why? The fourth brother smiled. Just answer. Perhaps 200. And if you needed more. 300. The fourth brother nodded. Good. The captain hesitated. Is this about Lord Cedric? The fourth brother's expression hardened. No. He paused. Not yet. Meanwhile, in Ashfall, Cedric had no idea what was happening. He was too busy arguing with Master Rowan. Why did you build this? Rowan proudly pointed toward a strange wooden machine. It's a water-powered grain mill. Cedric stared. It looks dangerous. It's perfectly safe. The machine suddenly made a loud cracking noise. Everyone froze. Rowan coughed. Mostly. Greta covered her face. The workshop apprentices laughed. Cedric smiled. Despite everything, these moments reminded him why Ashfall mattered. It wasn't numbers. It wasn't political influence. It was this. People working together. People learning. People building things that hadn't existed before. A letter from home. That evening, Cedric received another letter from House Valmont. He opened it. His expression slowly changed. Greta noticed. What happened? Cedric handed her the letter. It was an invitation. The family intended to hold another gathering. This time, the invitation specifically requested Cedric's presence. Greta frowned. That wasn't there before. No. Are you going? Cedric folded the letter. I probably should. Oswald looked concerned. Why? Cedric smiled faintly. Because if they're finally inviting me, something has changed. The council's concern. That night, the council gathered. Cedric explained the invitation. Everyone had an opinion. Greta immediately objected. I don't trust it. Oswald agreed. Neither do I. Teacher Elena looked thoughtful. But ignoring them could be worse. Dr. Miriam nodded. House Valmont is still powerful. Farmer Hugo sighed. And they're his family. Everyone looked toward Cedric. He remained quiet. Finally, I'll go. Greta frowned. Are you sure? Cedric nodded. But this time, I won't go as the useless youngest son they sent away. He looked toward Ashfall through the window. I'll go as Lord of Ashfall. The first move. 2 days later, a merchant caravan arrived. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. The caravan carried the seal of one of Cedric's brothers. Oswald immediately noticed. He approached Cedric. These merchants aren't here to trade. Cedric looked at the caravan. What are they doing? Oswald's expression hardened. Testing us. The merchants began asking questions. How much grain did Ashfall produce? How much did the workshop manufacture? Which roads were privately owned? How much tax did Ashfall collect? Who controlled the market? Who supplied the clinic? Who funded the school? They asked politely. Too politely. Cedric understood. Someone was studying Ashfall, looking for weaknesses. The council's response. Cedric refused to panic. Instead, he called the council. We won't hide anything. Greta looked surprised. You're going to tell them everything. Cedric nodded. Yes. Oswald frowned. Why? Because our strength isn't secrecy. He looked around the room. It's cooperation. The council agreed. The merchants received accurate information. No secrets. No manipulation. No bribes. Just facts. When the caravan finally left, Greta watched it disappear. Do you think they'll report everything? Cedric nodded. Probably. And you're not worried? Cedric smiled. They'll report the truth. The seed. Far away. The merchant delivered his report. The third brother read it carefully. Everything is organized. Yes. Everyone trusts Cedric. Yes. Then attacking him directly would be difficult. The third brother closed the folder. Exactly. He smiled. So don't attack Cedric. Attack the things around him. The first seed had been planted. And Cedric didn't know it yet. But the brothers had finally stopped asking whether Ashfall could succeed. Now they were asking, how could they make it fail? Chapter 5. Shadows Behind Smiles. The invitation from House Valmont remained on Cedric's desk. He had not opened it again. He already knew what it contained. A family gathering. A formal dinner. A request for his presence. And beneath all those polite words, something else. A quiet morning. Ashfall woke beneath a pale morning sky. Cedric walked through the marketplace as usual. Merchants greeted him. Children waved. Craftsmen called out from their workshops. Everything looked peaceful. But Cedric had begun noticing small things. A merchant stopping his conversation when Cedric approached. A traveler asking unusually detailed questions about Ashfall's defenses. A noble family's carriage arriving. Then leaving without speaking to anyone. None of it was enough to prove anything. But together, it felt wrong. Oswald's warning. Cedric found Oswald reviewing trade records. You've been staring at that page for 10 minutes. Oswald looked up. Because something doesn't make sense. He turned the ledger toward Cedric. 3 merchants have suddenly stopped buying grain from Ashfall. Why? They won't say. Cedric frowned. Are they buying from someone else? Yes. Who? Oswald hesitated. Several merchants connected to noble houses in the capital. Cedric understood immediately. Someone is trying to influence the market. That's what I think. Not an attack. Greta joined them. Should we do something? Cedric shook his head. Not yet. Greta frowned. Why? Because if we react without proof, we become the aggressors. Oswald nodded slowly. Cedric looked toward the marketplace. We'll watch. The first rumor. By afternoon, a rumor had spread through the market. Someone claimed Ashfall's grain was contaminated. Another claimed the clinic was hiding disease outbreaks. A third claimed the council was secretly increasing taxes. None of it was true. But rumors traveled quickly, especially when people wanted to believe them. Teacher Elena arrived at the council hall looking concerned. Some parents are asking whether the school is safe. Dr. Miriam followed. Patients are asking whether the clinic's medicines are legitimate. Greta slammed her hand against the table. Who is doing this? Cedric remained calm. We don't know. Yet. The council responds. Instead of hiding, Cedric opened everything. The clinic published its medical records. The school invited parents to inspect the classrooms. The market displayed its tax and pricing records. Oswald opened the trade books. Dr. Miriam personally explained the clinic's procedures. Teacher Elena welcomed every concerned parent. The rumors had nowhere to hide. By evening, most of them had disappeared. People had seen the truth with their own eyes. Greta smiled. That worked. Cedric nodded. Because Ashfall has nothing to hide. Meanwhile, in the capital, a private gathering was taking place inside a luxurious manor. Several noblemen sat around a long table. Among them, Lord Adrian Vane, the same nobleman Cedric had rejected. A sealed report sat before him. He opened it. Rumors aren't working. One nobleman frowned. How? The people trust Cedric. Another laughed bitterly. Commoners shouldn't trust a lord that much. Adrian calmly poured himself wine. Then perhaps, we shouldn't attack his reputation. Everyone looked toward him. Attack his opportunities. The political game. A noblewoman seated across from him spoke. Explain. Adrian placed several documents on the table. Merchant contracts. Royal appointments. Academy connections. Trade routes. We don't need Ashfall to collapse. We simply need to make it harder for Cedric to expand. A nobleman smiled. So we isolate him. Exactly. House Valmont watches. At the Valmont estate, Cedric's eldest brother received a report. He read it silently. Then another. Then another. The reports described the rumors. The failed attempts to damage Ashfall's reputation. The merchant pressure. The growing interest from noble houses. He placed the documents down. His advisor waited. Should we intervene? The eldest brother shook his head. No. Why? Because Cedric hasn't asked us for help. He paused. And because I want to see how he handles this. A brother's suspicion. The second brother entered the room. You've seen the reports. Yes. Someone is targeting Ashfall. I know. The second brother smiled. Shouldn't we protect our family? The eldest brother looked at him. Are you concerned about Cedric? The second brother's smile disappeared. I'm concerned about House Valmont. The eldest brother studied him carefully. Are you? Neither brother spoke. The Royal Academy. 2 days later, another letter arrived in Ashfall. This one came from the Royal Academy. They formally requested permission to establish a permanent research office in the territory. Teacher Elena was thrilled. This could bring scholars here. Dr. Miriam smiled. And medical researchers. Oswald added. More merchants will follow. Greta looked at Cedric. That's good, isn't it? Cedric nodded. It is. But he couldn't ignore the timing. Someone was trying to isolate Ashfall, while others were trying to bring it closer to the kingdom's institutions. Which meant, there were powerful people on both sides. The unexpected visitor. That evening, a young nobleman arrived at the council hall. He introduced himself as Lord Julian Ardent. Unlike Lord Vane, he carried no business proposal. No demands. No contract. He simply bowed. I wanted to see Ashfall for myself. Cedric welcomed him. What do you think? Julian looked through the window toward the town. Honestly. Please. I think your people are happier than most nobles. Cedric smiled. That's the goal. Julian hesitated. Then you should be careful. Cedric's expression changed. Why? Julian lowered his voice. Because some people don't want you to succeed. The warning. Julian explained what he had heard in the capital. Several noble houses had begun discussing Ashfall. Some admired it. Others feared it. A few wanted to control it. Your success has become political. Cedric nodded. I suspected. Julian looked surprised. You knew. I knew people were watching. He looked toward the town. I didn't realize how many. A dangerous truth. After Julian left, Cedric remained in the council hall. Greta stood beside him. Are you worried? Cedric thought about it. Yes. She looked surprised. He smiled. But being worried isn't the same as being afraid. Greta nodded. Cedric looked around the room. At the council table, the charter hanging on the wall. The maps, the reports, the names of every village connected to Ashfall. We built this together. They can spread rumors. They can pressure merchants. They can make political deals. But they can't take Ashfall. Unless we let them. The shadow behind the smile. That night, Cedric received one final letter. It came from House Valmont. The invitation had been updated. A handwritten message had been added beneath the official seal. Brother, it has been too long. Let us speak honestly. Cedric stared at the words. For some reason, that frightened him more than any threat. Because his brothers were finally smiling at him. And Cedric had begun to understand. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the person who greeted you as family. Chapter 6, The Merchant Conspiracy. The morning after Cedric received the letter from House Valmont, Ashfall's marketplace was unusually quiet. Not empty. Not closed. Just careful. Merchants spoke in lowered voices. Several grain sellers had already changed their prices. Some traders who normally stayed for weeks were preparing to leave. Oswald noticed immediately. Something was happening. The missing contracts. Oswald spread several documents across the council table. 5 merchants have cancelled their long-term contracts. Greta frowned. All 5. Within 3 days. Cedric studied the papers. Did they give reasons? Officially. Oswald shook his head. Poor harvest expectations. Cedric looked at him. And unofficially. Oswald pointed toward another document. Someone offered them better prices elsewhere. The pattern. Farmer Hugo entered carrying a sack of grain. I've heard the same thing from the farmers. Cedric looked up. What? Several buyers are offering unusually high prices for our grain. Greta frowned. That's good, isn't it? Oswald shook his head. Not if they're trying to buy everything. Cedric understood. They're trying to control the supply. Oswald nodded. Exactly. The first warning. That afternoon, a merchant named Bernard approached Cedric privately. My lord. Cedric recognized him. Bernard had been trading in Ashfall since the market was first established. What happened? Bernard looked nervous. I've been offered a contract from Lord Vane's trading company. Cedric's expression remained calm. What kind of contract? Exclusive purchase rights. For all the grain I can produce. Cedric asked. And what happens if you refuse? Bernard swallowed. They said I may have difficulty finding buyers elsewhere. A threat without a threat. Greta immediately wanted to confront Lord Vane. Cedric stopped her. Don't. Why? Because technically, they haven't done anything illegal. Greta clenched her fists. Yet. Cedric nodded. Exactly. Oswald looked thoughtful. They're trying to force merchants into dependency. Cedric pointed toward the market. Then we make sure nobody becomes dependent on them. The council's answer. The council created an emergency trade program. Farmers could sell grain directly through the community market. Small merchants could purchase supplies collectively. No single company could control the majority of Ashfall's food supply. The bakery would receive priority access to grain. The community granary would remain untouched except during emergencies. And every contract would be publicly recorded. Teacher Elena looked at the proposal. Won't this anger the merchants? Oswald smiled. The honest ones will appreciate it. And the dishonest ones, they were already angry. The offer. 2 days later, Lord Vane's representatives arrived. They entered the council hall carrying contracts. Their leader smiled politely. We're prepared to offer Ashfall a generous arrangement. Cedric motioned for him to continue. We purchase your grain at above market prices. Farmer Hugo immediately frowned. Why? The representative smiled. Because we believe in Ashfall. Oswald nearly laughed. Cedric simply asked, and what do you want in return? Priority access. How much? 70%. Silence. Greta stared at him. 70. The representative remained calm. Only temporarily. The refusal. Cedric stood. No. The representative blinked. You haven't heard the entire proposal. I've heard enough. He pointed toward the community granary. Food is not a political weapon. The representative's smile disappeared. We're offering you considerable wealth. Cedric answered quietly. And you're asking us to surrender control over our people's food. He shook his head. No. The threat. As the representatives prepared to leave, one of them stopped beside Oswald. You may regret this. Oswald smiled. I've regretted worse. The man leaned closer. You don't understand who you're dealing with. Oswald's expression became cold. Perhaps. He stepped aside. But you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with either. The market changes. Within days, the consequences arrived. Several large merchants stopped trading in Ashfall. Prices rose. Some imported goods disappeared from the market. Traveling merchants began warning others against doing business there. Ashfall's trade slowed. For the first time, the marketplace felt the weight of political pressure. Greta entered the council hall. We're losing merchants. Oswald nodded. Some. Cedric looked at him. How many? 20%. Greta looked alarmed. Oswald continued. But our local trade has increased. Cedric smiled. Because people are buying from one another. The craftsmen step in. The workshop soon became unexpectedly important. With imported tools becoming harder to obtain, Ashfall's craftsmen began producing replacements. Master Rowan looked at the orders. Well, he grinned. Looks like everyone suddenly needs us. The apprentices worked day and night. Plows, hammers, nails, kitchen tools, wheel parts, simple machines, anything the town needed. The workshop couldn't replace everything. But it replaced enough. The bakery's decision. Clara, the baker, was also pressured. A merchant offered her a private supply of flour. Cheap. Very cheap. But the contract required her to stop buying grain from local farmers. She refused. The merchant stared at her. You'll pay more. Clara smiled. Then I'll pay more. But your bakery will suffer. She looked toward the children eating bread outside. Maybe. But I won't sell their future for cheaper flour. The community responds. News of the attempted monopoly spread. Instead of panicking, the people of Ashfall reacted. Farmers increased direct sales. Craftsmen repaired broken tools for free when possible. Merchants formed cooperative purchasing groups. The bakery bought locally. The school gardens expanded. Even the children helped plant vegetables. Ashfall's economy became less dependent on outside merchants. The real goal. One evening, Oswald placed another report before Cedric. The conspiracy isn't about grain. Cedric looked at him. What do you mean? They aren't trying to make money. He pointed toward the numbers. They're trying to make Ashfall dependent on them. Cedric's expression hardened. So that later, they can dictate terms. Cedric nodded. Then we don't let them. The hidden connection. That night, Oswald discovered something troubling. Several of the merchants involved in the conspiracy had connections to different noble houses. Not just Lord Vane, others too. He followed the records further. One name appeared repeatedly. House Valmont. Oswald froze. He immediately brought the documents to Cedric. Cedric stared at the page. Which brother? We don't know. Are you sure? Oswald nodded. The money passes through intermediaries. Cedric slowly closed the folder. For the first time, the problem felt personal. A difficult decision. Greta wanted to investigate immediately. Cedric refused. We need proof. But if it's one of your brothers. I know. Greta stopped. Cedric looked toward the darkened marketplace. I don't want suspicion to become an accusation. He paused. And I won't attack my family based on guesses. The merchant's last move. 3 days later, a massive caravan arrived outside Ashfall. Its wagons were filled with grain. The merchants offered it at half the normal price. People gathered. Half-price grain was difficult to resist. But Oswald immediately recognized the danger. If everyone bought from them, local farmers would lose their buyers. The community granary would become unnecessary. And the merchants would eventually control the market. Cedric stood before the crowd. We won't stop you from buying. Everyone looked at him. But remember, cheap today does not mean cheap tomorrow. Farmer Hugo stepped forward. I'll keep selling. Clara joined him. So will I. Then another merchant. And another. Soon, most of the local traders stood together. The foreign merchants slowly realized something. They couldn't buy Ashfall's loyalty. Because Ashfall wasn't built on profit alone. It was built on trust. The conspiracy fails. Within weeks, the merchants withdrew. Their cheap grain had failed. Their contracts had failed. Their pressure had failed. Ashfall's economy had survived. And, unexpectedly, it had become stronger. Oswald looked at the final report. They underestimated us. Cedric smiled. No, they misunderstood us. A letter in the night. That same evening, a messenger arrived from the capital. He carried a single sealed letter. Cedric opened it. Inside was a brief message. The merchant pressure against Ashfall has ended. But the people who ordered it have not. No name was attached. No signature. Cedric looked toward the darkness outside. Someone in the capital had been watching. Someone knew exactly what had happened. And someone was warning him. That this was only the beginning. Chapter 7. Refugees from the East. The merchant conspiracy had ended. At least, that was what Ashfall wanted to believe. The marketplace had recovered. Farmers were selling their grain again. The craftsmen had returned to their usual work. But the political pressure surrounding Ashfall had not disappeared. It had merely changed shape. The riders at the gate. It was early morning when the eastern watchtower sounded its alarm. Not the emergency bell. Not the invasion bell. 3 long calls. Travelers. Greta hurried toward the gate. What happened? The guard pointed toward the eastern road. A long line of people was approaching. Wagons. Carts. Families carrying bundles. Elderly people walking beside exhausted horses. Children sleeping against their parents. There were hundreds of them. And they were coming toward Ashfall. The first family. Cedric arrived at the gate shortly afterward. A woman stepped forward. Her clothes were covered in dust. She held a young boy's hand. My lord, she bowed. We heard Ashfall accepts people. Cedric looked behind her. Where are you from? The Eastern Territories. Her voice trembled. We had to leave. Why? The woman looked down. Taxes. Cedric frowned. What kind? Everything. She swallowed. Our lord raised taxes 3 times. They took our grain. Then our animals. When people couldn't pay, they took their homes. Cedric's expression hardened. And now, the woman looked toward the road behind her. Now there is almost nothing left. More arrive. The stories were different, but the ending was always the same. Families fleeing oppressive taxes. Farmers whose fields had been seized. Craftsmen whose workshops had been taken. Children who had stopped attending school. Elderly people forced from their homes. Some had walked for weeks. Others had traveled at night to avoid being stopped. All of them had heard the same rumor. Ashfall welcomes those who need a place to start again. The council's dilemma. The council gathered immediately. Farmer Hugo looked worried. How many? Greta answered. At least 300. Oswald shook his head. And more are coming. Dr. Miriam looked toward the window. Some are sick. Teacher Elena quietly added. Several children haven't attended school in months. Silence filled the room. Greta finally spoke. We can't simply turn them away. Hugo nodded. But we can't feed everyone indefinitely. Oswald looked at the grain reports. Our stores can handle a temporary increase. Temporary. Oswald hesitated. We don't know how many will come. Everyone looked toward Cedric. He remained silent for several seconds. Then, let them in. The question of tomorrow. Greta nodded. But what happens afterward? Cedric looked at the maps. We don't know yet. That's dangerous. I know. We could run out of food. I know. The town could become overcrowded. I know. Greta sighed. Then why? Cedric looked toward the window. Because outside, a child was sleeping against a wooden cart. Because they're already here. The first night, that evening, Ashfall opened its community halls. The old storage buildings became temporary shelters. The school opened several classrooms for families with young children. The bakery increased production. The clinic treated patients until midnight. Local families brought blankets. Farmers donated vegetables. Merchants offered clothing. Nobody was asked to do it. They simply did. One elderly refugee stared at the warm bowl of soup placed before him. I haven't eaten something this good in months. The young woman serving him smiled. It's only vegetable soup. He shook his head. No. He looked around the crowded hall. It's dignity. She didn't know how to answer. The children. The next morning, teacher Elena discovered something unexpected. Several refugee children were standing outside the school. They weren't enrolled. They weren't registered. They simply stood there, watching. Lily approached them. Do you want to come inside? One boy shook his head. We don't have books. Lily smiled. Neither did I at first. She grabbed his hand. I'll share mine. Within minutes, the children were sitting together. Some didn't understand the lessons. Some were far behind, but they were smiling. Dr. Miriam. The clinic faced a greater challenge. There were too many patients. Dr. Miriam worked until her hands trembled. Her apprentices helped. Then local volunteers began assisting. A refugee who had once worked as a healer introduced herself. My name is Alara. Miriam looked surprised. You're a healer. I was. Why was? Alara looked away. My lord took my clinic. Miriam handed her a medical apron. Then you're a healer again. The woman stared at her. Then smiled. The first jobs. Cedric gathered the council. We can't keep calling them refugees. Greta looked at him. What do you mean? They came here because they lost their homes. That doesn't mean they want charity. Cedric pointed toward the town. Many of them have skills. The council began recording their professions. Farmers, carpenters, weavers, blacksmiths, merchants, teachers, healers, builders, cooks, scribes, even musicians. Ashfall didn't see a crowd of mouths to feed. It saw people who had lost the opportunity to contribute. The temporary settlement. Master Rowan proposed expanding the eastern side of Ashfall. We can build temporary houses. Hugo immediately objected. Temporary. Rowan shrugged. If they stay, then we build permanent ones. Greta smiled. You've been waiting to say that. Obviously. The construction began. Refugees worked beside Ashfall's residents. Carpenters taught newcomers. Builders shared tools. Farmers showed them the fields. Within weeks, the temporary settlement began looking less temporary. Not everyone was happy. Not everyone welcomed the newcomers. Some villagers worried about jobs. Others feared food shortages. A few merchants complained that competition would increase. One evening, an argument broke out in the marketplace. You weren't born here. A refugee craftsman stepped backward. Cedric happened to be nearby. He walked over. The entire market became quiet. Cedric looked at the angry merchant. Neither was I. The man froze. Cedric continued. Most of us came from somewhere else. He looked around the marketplace. Ashfall wasn't built by people asking who belonged. It was built by people asking what they could build together. The merchant lowered his head. The refugee quietly thanked Cedric. Cedric shook his head. Don't thank me. Just build something. A new problem. 3 weeks later, the number of refugees had reached nearly 800. The temporary shelters were filling. Food consumption had increased dramatically. The school needed another classroom. The clinic needed more medicine. Ashfall's finances were beginning to strain. Oswald placed the numbers before Cedric. We can't maintain this indefinitely. Cedric nodded. I know. Greta crossed her arms. So what's the plan? Cedric looked at the map. We stopped treating this as an emergency. Everyone stared at him. We make it part of our future. A new settlement. The council approved a new district east of Ashfall. It would have homes, a small school, a clinic branch, workshops, farms, a public well, its own marketplace. But there was one important condition. No one would receive a home permanently for free. Instead, they would work toward owning it. Farmers would cultivate land, craftsmen would work in workshops, teachers would teach, builders would build, doctors would treat patients. Everyone would contribute according to their abilities. The first house was completed by a family of carpenters. The father stared at the key in his hand. This is ours. Cedric nodded. You built it. The man looked toward his wife. Then his children. His eyes filled with tears. We'll never forget this. Cedric smiled. Then don't. Teach someone else how to build theirs. The Eastern District. Months later, the settlement had become a proper neighborhood. Children played in the streets. New workshops opened. Farmers planted fields. The clinic treated patients. The school welcomed new students. People who had arrived with nothing were beginning to build lives again. The council's debate. But the council still worried. Oswald placed another report on the table. We've received another request. How many? 400. The room went silent. Greta slowly closed her eyes. More refugees. Oswald nodded. Cedric looked at the map. Then at the growing district. Then at the council. We help them. Hugo sighed. I knew you were going to say that. Cedric smiled. But this time, we need help too. A letter to the kingdom. Cedric dictated a letter. It wasn't a request for money. It wasn't a request for soldiers. It was an invitation. Ashfall would accept refugees. But the kingdom needed to help them rebuild. Other territories could provide land. Merchants could provide tools. Nobles could provide supplies. Craftsmen could offer apprenticeships. The refugees weren't Ashfall's burden alone. They were citizens of the kingdom. The king's response. Weeks later, a royal messenger arrived. The king had read Cedric's proposal. His response was brief. Approved. But beneath it, another sentence had been written. You continue to surprise me, Lord Cedric. Somewhere in the capital, several nobles were furious. They're rewarding him for this. He is turning refugees into loyal citizens. Another noble slammed his fist onto the table. Every person who settles in Ashfall strengthens Cedric. A quiet voice answered. Then perhaps, we should make sure fewer people reach Ashfall. The room became silent. A new danger was taking shape. Not an economic attack. Not rumors. Something darker. Ashfall at sunset. That evening, Cedric stood on the eastern hill overlooking the new district. Hundreds of lights glowed below. Families were eating dinner. Children were laughing. New houses stood beside old ones. A town that had once been empty was becoming home to people who had lost everything. Greta joined him. You realize they'll probably never stop coming. Cedric nodded. I know. Doesn't that scare you? Cedric looked toward the horizon. Yes. Then he smiled. But maybe, that's what a kingdom is supposed to do. Greta looked at him. What? Cedric watched another family light a lamp inside their new home. Give people somewhere to begin again. Far beyond the eastern road, another caravan was already approaching. And this time, someone was watching it. Chapter 8. United We Stand. The Eastern District had grown faster than anyone expected. What had begun as a temporary shelter was becoming a neighborhood. New houses stood beside freshly planted gardens. Small workshops had opened. Children filled the schoolyard. The clinic had gained another healer. And every morning, more people woke up believing that Ashfall was home. But not everyone was pleased. The price of growth. Inside the council hall, Oswald placed a thick report on the table. Our population has increased again. Greta sighed. How much? Enough that our current budget won't support another large influx. Farmer Hugo frowned. And the winter stores, still healthy. But, Oswald pointed toward the numbers. Only if we have a normal harvest. Everyone understood. Ashfall had always survived by planning ahead. Now they were being forced to plan for an entire region. A difficult question. Greta looked at Cedric. How many more people can we accept? Cedric didn't answer immediately. That was the first time the council had seen him hesitate. Finally, he said, I don't know. Silence. Cedric continued, and I won't pretend I do. He looked around the table. If we promise everyone a home but can't provide one, we're making promises we can't keep. Teacher Elena nodded. So what do we do? Cedric looked at the map. We ask for help. The council's decision. The council drafted a proposal to neighboring territories. Ashfall would continue accepting refugees. But the kingdom would share the responsibility. Each participating territory would provide one of three things: land, supplies, work opportunities. No territory could simply send people toward Ashfall and call the problem solved. They had to contribute. Oswald smiled. That will make some nobles unhappy. Greta shrugged. Good. Master Rowan raised his hand. Can I make the letter more insulting? No. Can I make it slightly insulting? No. Worth asking. The first rejection. The first reply arrived 3 days later. A neighboring lord refused. His letter was polite. His meaning wasn't. The problems of the Eastern Territories are not the responsibility of our domain. Greta crushed the letter. Wonderful. Cedric calmly smoothed it back out. We expected this. The second reply. The second territory offered land. Not much, but enough for several dozen families. The third offered tools. The fourth offered grain. The fifth offered work contracts for craftsmen. Slowly, the idea began spreading. A different kind of power. News reached the capital. Ashfall wasn't demanding that nobles help. Cedric was asking them to cooperate. And somehow, people were listening. The king took particular interest. A royal advisor read the latest report aloud. 4 territories have agreed to participate. The king smiled. How many did Lord Cedric ask? 7. So more than half. The advisor nodded. The king leaned back. Interesting. The noble houses react. Not every noble was impressed. One aristocrat slammed the report onto his desk. He's turning charity into political influence. Another noble quietly answered. No. He is turning cooperation into influence. The first man frowned. Isn't that the same thing? No. The second noble looked toward the capital. That's what makes it dangerous. The Eastern District. Meanwhile, Ashfall's new residents were becoming part of the town. A former farmer from the east began working alongside Hugo. A carpenter opened a workshop with Rowan's apprentices. A former healer joined Miriam at the clinic. Several refugee teachers began helping Elena. Even the marketplace had changed. New foods, new crafts, new songs, new traditions. Ashfall was becoming something larger than the place Cedric had originally inherited. A small argument. One afternoon, a local farmer and a refugee farmer argued over irrigation water. Both insisted they had priority. The dispute quickly attracted a crowd. Cedric arrived. What happened? The two farmers explained their sides. Cedric listened, then asked, how much water does each field actually need? They looked at each other. Neither knew. Cedric turned toward Hugo. Can we measure it? Hugo smiled. Of course. They spent the afternoon calculating. By sunset, they discovered there was enough water for both. They simply needed to change the schedule. The two farmers shook hands. Greta watched from nearby. You know. Cedric looked at her. Most lords would have simply chosen one side. Cedric shrugged. Then the other side would still be angry. The school changes. Teacher Elena faced a new challenge. The refugee children were at very different educational levels. Some couldn't read. Others were already advanced. Instead of separating them permanently, she created mixed classes. Older students helped younger ones. Ashfall's children taught the newcomers local customs. The newcomers taught them songs and stories from the East. The classroom became louder, messier, but happier. One afternoon, Lily stood before the class. Today we're learning the history of Ashfall. A refugee boy raised his hand. Can I tell everyone about my old village? Lily smiled. Of course. And for the first time, the history lesson wasn't only about the past. It was about the people carrying their past into the future. A letter from the East. Then, a messenger arrived. He carried terrible news. Another Eastern territory had begun forcibly turning refugees away. Families were being stopped at the borders. Some were being sent back. Others were simply left on the roads. The council fell silent. Greta looked at Cedric. What do we do? Cedric's expression hardened. We keep our gates open. Oswald frowned. Even if hundreds more arrive. Cedric nodded. Yes. Then he added. But this time, we won't do it alone. Cedric's message. Cedric sent a letter throughout the kingdom. Not as a noble demanding obedience. Not as a lord asking for charity. As a fellow ruler asking for responsibility. These people are not Ashfalls alone. They belong to this kingdom. If we cannot protect our own people together, then what exactly are our borders protecting? The letter spread quickly. Merchants copied it. Teachers discussed it. Clerks circulated it. Even some nobles quietly agreed. The unexpected response. 3 days later, a royal decree arrived. The king had officially established a frontier relief network. Ashfall would serve as its first coordination center. Cedric stared at the decree. Greta looked at him. Do you realize what this means? Cedric nodded slowly. Ashfall isn't handling this alone anymore. No, she smiled. The kingdom is finally helping. The council's victory. The council celebrated that evening. Not because Ashfall had gained political influence. Not because Cedric had impressed the king. But because the burden was finally being shared. Master Rowan raised a cup. To Ashfall. Hugo raised his. To the people. Elena smiled. To everyone who helped. Oswald added. And to the people who haven't helped yet. Greta laughed. That's a very Oswald toast. Cedric looked around the room. The people sitting beside him were no longer simply council members. They were friends. Partners. The people who had built Ashfall with him. He raised his cup. To standing together. Everyone echoed him. Together. But someone was watching. Far from the celebration. A messenger entered a private room. He handed a report to a nobleman. Ashfall's proposal succeeded. The nobleman read it. The king approved the Frontier Relief Network. He slowly folded the report. And Cedric, his reputation has increased. Again, the nobleman sighed. So every attempt to isolate him has made him stronger. Another man standing nearby smiled coldly. Then perhaps we shouldn't isolate him. The first noble looked up. What do you suggest? The answer came quietly. Give him something he can't solve with cooperation. A new threat. The next morning, Cedric received a sealed letter. Unlike the previous messages, this one contained no political proposal. No trade offer. No royal seal. Only a single sentence. Your family is watching. Cedric stared at it. His expression changed. For the first time, the danger wasn't merely around Ashfall. It was coming from within House Valmont. And Cedric finally understood. The merchant conspiracy had never been the real battle. It had only been the beginning. Chapter 9. Brothers Against Brothers. The letter remained on Cedric's desk. Your family is watching. No signature. No explanation. Only those 4 words. Cedric had read them several times. He finally folded the letter and placed it inside a drawer. Greta watched him. You're not going to investigate. Of course I am. When? Cedric looked toward the window. When I know what I'm looking for. House Valmont. Far away from Ashfall. The Valmont estate was becoming increasingly divided. The brothers still attended the same dinners. Still exchanged polite greetings. Still called one another family. But behind closed doors, their alliances were changing. The eldest brother had begun gathering older nobles who supported stability and tradition. The second brother was building relationships with merchants and younger aristocrats. The third brother quietly gathered information. The fourth brother surrounded himself with knights and military retainers. Nobody had declared war. Nobody had openly challenged the others. Yet everyone was preparing. The family council. Their father finally summoned them. All 4 brothers sat around the long table. Cedric's chair remained empty. The family patriarch looked at his sons. I have received concerning reports. No one spoke. Your behavior toward one another has changed. The second brother smiled. We're simply discussing the future of the family. The patriarch's expression hardened. That is precisely what concerns me. He placed several documents on the table. Ashfall. Every brother looked down. Your brother has turned an abandoned territory into one of the most prosperous regions in the frontier. The eldest brother remained silent. The patriarch continued. And instead of supporting him, he looked at each son. You are competing against him. A question of succession. The second brother finally spoke. Father. Yes. If Cedric continues gaining influence. He paused. Would you consider changing the succession? Silence. The eldest brother slowly turned toward him. The patriarch stared at his son. Why would you ask that? Because everyone else is thinking it. The patriarch's eyes narrowed. Are you? The second brother smiled. I am thinking about the future. The fourth brother suddenly laughed. You've always been thinking about yourself. The second brother's expression hardened. And you've always thought strength solves everything. At least I don't hide behind merchants. The third brother interrupted. Enough. But the damage had already been done. The first crack. Their father stood. You are brothers. The room became quiet. Whatever disagreements you have, you will not destroy this family over them. The fourth brother looked away. The second brother said nothing. The eldest brother remained perfectly composed. Only the third brother seemed genuinely concerned. Their father left. The moment the door closed, the eldest brother spoke. You're making a mistake. The second brother looked at him. What mistake? Turning this into an open competition. The second brother smiled. It already is. The factions. Within weeks, the divisions became clearer. Several old noble families aligned themselves with the eldest brother. They valued tradition. They believed the oldest son should inherit the greatest authority. Merchant families increasingly supported the second. He promised economic expansion. The third attracted scholars, administrators, and information brokers. The fourth gained support from military officers. Each faction claimed it wanted the best for House Valmont. But each quietly wanted its chosen brother to win. Cedric's name. And somehow, Cedric remained at the center of everything. A noble supporting the eldest would say, Cedric should remain in Ashfall. A merchant supporting the second would argue, his territory must be brought under stronger family oversight. Military officers asked, how many troops does Ashfall have? Scholars asked, could Cedric become a royal advisor? Every conversation eventually returned to him. Cedric learns the truth. Oswald was the first to bring Cedric concrete evidence. The merchant families are dividing. Cedric looked over the reports. Between whom? Oswald hesitated. Your brothers. Cedric's expression became serious. All of them. Yes. Greta crossed her arms. So they're actually fighting. Not yet. Oswald placed another report on the table. But they're choosing sides. Cedric leaned back. They're turning House Valmont into factions. Oswald nodded. And you're becoming the reason they're doing it. Cedric was silent. He didn't like that. A brother's visit. Several days later, one of Cedric's brothers unexpectedly arrived in Ashfall. No military escort. No noble procession. Only 2 guards. Cedric personally welcomed him. You're far from home. The brother smiled. So are you. They walked through the marketplace together. People greeted Cedric. Some bowed. Others simply smiled. The brother watched everything. They really trust you. Cedric nodded. I trust them too. They reached the Eastern District. The brother looked at the new houses. These people were refugees. Yes. And now they own homes. Many of them. The brother remained silent. Finally. You've built something impressive. Cedric smiled. Thank you. The question. The brother stopped walking. Would you ever return to the family estate? Cedric looked at him. Why? Because father is getting older. Cedric understood. You want me back. I want the family together. Cedric looked toward the marketplace. I don't think that's what you really want. The brother's expression tightened. What do you mean? You want me somewhere you can see me. Silence. Cedric continued. Because as long as I'm here, you don't know what I'll become. The brother stared at him. Then smiled. You've changed. Cedric answered quietly. So have you. A warning. Before leaving, the brother turned back. Be careful. Cedric looked at him. The others aren't as patient as I am. Cedric's expression hardened. Are you warning me? The brother hesitated. Yes. Then he left. The council reacts. Greta was furious. He came here to measure you. Oswald agreed. Probably. Teacher Elena looked worried. Could they attack Ashfall? Cedric shook his head. Not directly. Why? Because attacking Ashfall would make them look like enemies of their own family. Greta understood. So they'll work indirectly. Cedric nodded. Exactly. The first political attack. A week later, a royal administrative office sent Ashfall a notice. Its taxes would be reviewed. Nothing unusual. Except, the requested documentation was enormous. Decades of records. Every trade contract. Every land transfer. Every public expenditure. Every community project. Greta stared at the papers. This is ridiculous. Oswald sighed. It's legal. Cedric looked at the seal. Which brother? We don't know. Instead of complaining, Cedric opened the archives. The council worked for days. Every document was organized, every account verified, every transaction recorded. When the inspectors arrived, they found nothing wrong. The chief inspector looked almost disappointed. Your records are exceptionally thorough. Cedric smiled. We have nothing to hide. The second attack. Then came another. A noble house attempted to purchase land surrounding Ashfall. At first, it looked like ordinary investment. But the land included several key roads. If the purchase succeeded, the roads could eventually be controlled by outsiders. Cedric refused to sell. The nobles complained. Cedric remained firm. The brothers' game. In the capital, the second brother received the news. He refused. Yes. The second brother smiled. Good. His advisor looked confused. Good. It means he's predictable. Another advisor entered. The eldest has begun gaining support from 3 additional houses. The second brother's smile vanished. So it begins. No longer brothers. That evening, the eldest brother received similar news. The second was gaining merchant support. The third was collecting information. The fourth was strengthening his military connections. He slowly closed his eyes. House Valmont wasn't united anymore. It had become 4 competing futures. And Cedric, the youngest brother who wasn't even participating, was somehow the most important piece on the board. Cedric's choice. Back in Ashfall, Cedric stood before the council. I've decided something. Everyone listened. I won't choose a faction. Greta nodded. Good. I won't support one brother against another. Oswald looked relieved. And I won't allow House Valmont's conflict to control Ashfall. Cedric looked around the room. This territory belongs to its people. Whatever happens to my family, Ashfall remains ours. The storm draws closer. That night, another letter arrived. This time, it carried the seal of the royal palace. Cedric opened it. His eyes widened slightly. The king had summoned him to the capital. Again, but this time, the message contained a second line. Come alone. There are matters concerning House Valmont that cannot be discussed through letters. Cedric slowly lowered the page. The family conflict had reached the royal court. And now, the king wanted him personally involved. Chapter 10, The Hidden Saboteur. The royal summons remained unopened on Cedric's desk. Not because he intended to ignore it. He simply had something more urgent to deal with. A report had arrived from the Eastern District. 3 newly built homes had been damaged overnight. A workshop had lost several expensive tools. And one of the irrigation channels had been deliberately blocked. None of the damage was severe. That was what worried Cedric. It looked intentional. The first sign. Greta stood beside the damaged irrigation channel. This wasn't an accident. Cedric crouched beside the broken mechanism. The wooden support hadn't cracked. It had been cut cleanly, with a sharp blade. Greta's expression hardened. Someone did this. Cedric nodded. Yes. Who? We don't know. The workshop. Master Rowan's workshop had suffered worse. Several specialized tools were missing. Not stolen randomly. Only the tools needed to repair the new water-powered machinery. Rowan stared at the empty shelves. They knew exactly what to take. Cedric examined the marks around the storage room. Did anyone see anything? One apprentice shook his head. Everyone thought the night guard was watching. Cedric looked toward the doorway. Where is the guard? Silence. Missing. The guard had disappeared. His room was empty. His belongings were gone. There was no sign of a struggle. Oswald immediately became concerned. He wasn't working alone. Cedric looked at him. What makes you think that? Because whoever did this knew our routines. He pointed toward the reports. The irrigation channel. The workshop. The homes. 3 separate places. They needed information. The council tightened security. For the first time, Ashfall introduced night patrols. Not soldiers. Volunteers. Farmers. Craftsmen. Shopkeepers. Anyone willing to help. The town gates were closed earlier. Important records were moved to secure rooms. The clinic and school established emergency procedures. Even the children were told to report strangers behaving suspiciously. Ashfall didn't become a fortress. But it became more careful. A strange discovery. 2 nights later, a patrol found footprints near the northern road. The tracks belonged to 3 people. One had a military-style boot. Another wore ordinary work shoes. The third had walked barefoot for part of the journey. Greta stared at the tracks. Why would anyone do that? Cedric answered. To hide their identity. The patrol followed the footprints. They ended beside an abandoned storage shed. Inside, they found several crates, tools, maps, food, and documents. The documents. Oswald opened the first document. It contained detailed information about Ashfall. Population numbers, food production, road locations, guard schedules, council meeting times, school hours, clinic schedules, even the daily movements of several council members. Rita's face went pale. Someone has been watching us. Cedric nodded. For a long time. The name. Then, Oswald found a payment record. The recipient's name was partially obscured. But the seal was clear. A black and gold crest. House Valmont. The room became completely silent. Greta slowly looked toward Cedric. Cedric stared at the seal. He didn't speak. Proof. Master Rowan clenched his fist. That's enough. Cedric shook his head. No. Why not? Because the seal proves someone used House Valmont's name. It doesn't prove which brother ordered this. Rowan frowned. But, I won't accuse my family without knowing the truth. The prisoner. The patrols continued searching. By dawn, they found one of the suspected saboteurs hiding near the western forest. He attempted to flee. The guards caught him. He was young, barely older than Cedric himself. He refused to speak, until Dr. Miriam discovered that his leg was badly injured. She treated him, then offered him water. The young man stared at her. Why? Miriam answered simply. Because you're hurt. The confession. Hours later, the young man finally spoke. My name is Tomas. Cedric sat across from him. Who hired you? Tomas looked away. I can't tell you. Why? They'll kill my family. Cedric remained silent. Tomas continued. We weren't supposed to hurt anyone. What were you supposed to do? Damage things. Steal tools. Create shortages. Make people think Ashfall was becoming unstable. Cedric's expression hardened. Who? Tomas hesitated. Then whispered. An intermediary. Who's intermediary? Tomas closed his eyes. House Valmont. The real target. Cedric asked the question that mattered most. What was the goal? Tomas looked at him. Not to destroy Ashfall. Cedric frowned. Then what? To make the people lose confidence in you. Silence. Tomas continued. They wanted the council to start fighting. They wanted merchants to leave. They wanted refugees to become angry. They wanted Ashfall to look like a failed experiment. Greta's expression became furious. They wanted us to destroy ourselves. Tomas nodded. The council's anger. The council meeting that afternoon was unlike any before. Hugo slammed his fist onto the table. They attacked our people. Oswald's voice was cold. They attacked our trust. Teacher Elena looked shaken. They tried to turn neighbors against one another. Dr. Miriam quietly said. And they used frightened people to do it. Everyone looked toward Cedric. Cedric stood. We will not become what they expect. Greta looked at him. What do? We strengthen everything they tried to weaken. The response. The council created a new security system. Important information was divided among several trusted officials. No single person would know every patrol route. All contracts would require multiple signatures. Night guards would rotate. The workshops would maintain inventory records. The school and clinic would establish emergency contacts. And most importantly, the council would communicate openly with the people. The town meeting. That evening, Cedric stood before the entire marketplace. He told them the truth. Someone had attempted to sabotage Ashfall. Someone had stolen tools, damaged infrastructure, and tried to create distrust. The crowd became angry. But Cedric raised his hand. We will not answer fear with fear. We will not accuse people without proof. And we will not turn against one another. An elderly farmer shouted. Then what do? Cedric looked around. We continue. The crowd became quiet. We build. We work. We trust. And when someone tries to break what we've built, we repair it together. The people answer. The next morning, the damaged houses were repaired. The irrigation channel was rebuilt. The workshop replaced its stolen tools. Farmers helped the affected families. Craftsmen donated materials. The school organized a collection for the damaged households. The clinic cared for Tomas until he could walk again. The sabotage had failed. Not because Ashfall was impossible to hurt, but because the people refused to stay broken. A second letter. That evening, Cedric received another message. This one was from the capital. It contained only a few lines. The evidence you discovered is real. But do not assume all Valmont brothers are involved. One of them is trying to stop the others. You must discover which one before it is too late. Cedric stared at the letter. One brother was trying to stop the sabotage. But who? The missing piece. Oswald entered the room. We found something else. He placed a small metal insignia on the table. It belonged to the missing guard. Cedric picked it up. On the back was a tiny symbol, not the Valmont crest, a symbol belonging to one of Cedric's brothers. Cedric's eyes narrowed. Greta stepped closer. So now we know. Cedric shook his head. No. He turned the insignia over. Now, we have another question. The question, who had given the guard the insignia? Was it proof of involvement? Or had someone deliberately planted it? And if one of Cedric's brothers was truly behind the sabotage, why had another brother warned him? The answers remained hidden, but one thing was certain. The conflict inside House Valmont had crossed a dangerous line. It was no longer merely about inheritance. It had reached Ashfall, and Cedric knew, the next attack might not be aimed at buildings. It might be aimed at people. Chapter 11, A Royal Summons. The second letter from the royal palace remained on Cedric's desk. Come alone. Those two words bothered him more than the summons itself. A royal command was normal. A private warning from the king was not. Cedric folded the letter and looked toward the window. Ashfall was quiet that morning. Children were walking to school. Farmers were heading toward the fields. Craftsmen were opening their workshops. Everything looked peaceful. But Cedric knew better now. The storm had already reached his doorstep. The council meeting. Cedric called an emergency meeting. Greta, Oswald, Teacher Elena, Dr. Miriam, Hugo, and Master Rowan gathered around the table. Cedric placed the royal letter before them. Greta read it first. Her expression immediately darkened. You're going alone. That's what the king requested. I don't like it. Neither do I. Master Rowan crossed his arms. Then don't go. Everyone looked at him. Cedric smiled faintly. Unfortunately, refusing a royal summons isn't exactly an option. Rowan frowned. I know. He looked toward the letter. I still don't like it. The saboteur. The discussion quickly turned to the investigation. Oswald placed the evidence on the table. The captured saboteur is being treated at the clinic. And the missing guard. Still missing. Greta frowned. The Valmont insignia. Still unexplained. Cedric looked at the documents. The evidence pointed toward his family. But not clearly enough. Someone wanted him to believe House Valmont was responsible. Someone else might be trying to hide the truth. And now the king wanted him in the capital. A difficult decision. Teacher Elena spoke quietly. Could the summons be connected to the sabotage? Probably. Dr. Miriam nodded. The king may already know something. Oswald looked at Cedric. Or someone has told him something. Cedric understood. The royal court was full of people with their own interests. If his brothers were already building factions, then the capital was probably even more dangerous than Ashfall. Cedric stood. I'll leave tomorrow. Greta immediately said. I'll prepare the escort. Cedric shook his head. The letter says alone. Greta frowned. Then you'll at least take a few guards. No. Why? Because if the king specifically requested that I come alone, I need to understand why. Preparing Ashfall. Cedric spent the rest of the day making preparations. The council reviewed every ongoing project. The refugee settlement received enough supplies for several weeks. The school received additional funding. The clinic stocked emergency medicine. The granary was secured. The guards received new instructions. And the council was given authority to make decisions without Cedric. Greta watched him sign document after document. You've planned for everything. Cedric smiled. I've learned. A private conversation. That evening, Oswald found Cedric alone in the council hall. You trust us? Cedric looked at him. Completely. Then why do you look worried? Cedric leaned against the table. Because I'm leaving Ashfall during the most dangerous period we've ever faced. Oswald nodded. You don't have to carry everything yourself. Cedric smiled. I know. Oswald placed a hand on the table. Then remember that. The journey begins. The following morning, Cedric left Ashfall. No grand procession. No military parade. Only a single carriage and one driver. At the eastern gate, the council waited. Greta looked unusually serious. Come back. Cedric smiled. I will. That's not a promise. It is. She stared at him. Good. As the carriage began moving, Cedric looked back. Ashfall stood beneath the morning sun. The town he had inherited. The people who had become his family. The wasteland that had become a home. He wondered whether he would return to find it unchanged. Somehow, he doubted it. The road to the capital. The journey took several days. Along the way, Cedric saw how much the kingdom had changed. Or perhaps, how much he had changed. Villages were smaller than Ashfall. Their roads were poorly maintained. Some schools had only one classroom. Several clinics lacked medicine. Farmers struggled with taxes. Cedric watched quietly from the carriage. Ashfall had seemed ordinary when he first arrived. Now, it looked extraordinary. An unexpected encounter. On the third day, Cedric stopped at a roadside inn. A merchant recognized him. Lord Cedric. Cedric looked up. Yes. The merchant smiled. I've heard about Ashfall. Cedric sighed. Of course you have. The merchant laughed. Don't worry. I mean that as a compliment. He sat nearby. People in the capital are talking about you. Cedric became cautious. What are they saying? Some say you're a genius. Others say you're reckless. And some say you're dangerous. Cedric raised an eyebrow. Dangerous. The merchant shrugged. To people who profit from the way things used to be. The capital appears. On the fifth day, the capital finally appeared on the horizon. Massive walls surrounded the city. Towers rose above them. Thousands of houses filled the valley. And at the center, the royal palace stood above everything. Cedric stared at it. He had seen drawings, but nothing prepared him for the scale. The capital was enormous, beautiful, powerful, and intimidating. The palace gate. When Cedric arrived, royal guards immediately surrounded the carriage. Lord Cedric Valmont. Cedric stepped down. Yes, you were expected. He followed them through the palace gates. The moment he entered, he felt it. Eyes. Dozens of them. Nobles watched from balconies. Servants whispered. Officials glanced at him. Everyone knew who he was. The young lord from the wasteland. Cedric walked through the grand hall. Whispers followed him. That's him. The Lord of Ashfall. The youngest Valmont. They say he rebuilt the entire territory. He's the one who rejected Vayne. Apparently the king favors him. Cedric ignored them. He kept walking. House Valmont. Then, he saw them. His brothers. They stood together at the far end of the hall. The eldest. The second. The third. The fourth. All four were dressed in formal noble attire. All four watched him approach. Cedric stopped. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the eldest brother smiled. Welcome home, Cedric. Cedric looked at him. This doesn't feel like home. The second brother laughed softly. Still blunt. The third brother said nothing. The fourth simply stared. The king's chamberlain. Before the brothers could say more, a royal chamberlain stepped forward. Lord Cedric. Cedric turned. The king will see you now. His brothers exchanged glances. Cedric followed the chamberlain. Behind him, the four brothers remained silent. Before the king, the doors opened. Cedric entered the throne room alone. The king sat upon the throne. But unlike the grand ceremonies Cedric had imagined, there were no ministers, no nobles, no audience, only the king, and one elderly advisor standing beside him. Cedric bowed. Your Majesty. The king studied him, then smiled. Lord Cedric. Cedric straightened. You asked me to come alone. I did. May I ask why? The king gestured toward the chair opposite him. Sit. Cedric did. The king leaned forward. I have read every report concerning Ashfall. Cedric remained silent. I have read about your economy. The schools, the clinics, the refugee settlements, the council, and the recent sabotage. Cedric's eyes narrowed. You know about that. I know more than you think. The king's warning. The king picked up a document. This was intercepted 3 nights ago. He handed it to Cedric. Cedric read it. His expression changed. It was a communication between several intermediaries. And at the bottom, was a symbol he recognized. House Valmont. But the king wasn't finished. There is another problem. Cedric looked up. What? The king stared directly at him. Your brothers are preparing for a succession struggle. Cedric's expression hardened. I know. No. The king's voice became serious. You don't. He leaned closer. They are not merely competing for inheritance anymore. They are building factions, and if they continue, the king paused. House Valmont may tear itself apart. The question Cedric feared. Cedric slowly lowered the document. Why tell me? The king looked toward him. Because you are the only one who isn't participating. Cedric said nothing. The king continued. And because you may soon become the person everyone wants on their side. Cedric's heart sank. He finally understood. The king hadn't summoned him because of Ashfall. Not entirely. He had summoned him because House Valmont was becoming dangerous. And Cedric was standing directly in the middle of it. The king looked toward the palace windows. Lord Cedric, before this is over, you may have to choose. Cedric stared at him. Between whom? The king answered quietly. Your brothers. Chapter 12. The Capital's Smile. The throne room doors closed behind Cedric. For several seconds, he simply stood there. The king's words echoed in his mind. Your brothers are preparing for a succession struggle. You may soon become the person everyone wants on their side. Cedric had expected political games. He had expected questions about Ashfall. He had not expected the king to tell him that House Valmont was already beginning to fracture. The king's warning. Cedric looked back at the king. Your Majesty. Yes. How serious is it? The king's expression became solemn. Serious enough that I summoned you personally. Cedric remained silent. The king continued. Your brothers have spent years competing. That is normal among noble families. But this is different. He placed 4 documents on the table. Each of them is building something. Influence, money, information, military support. The king looked directly at Cedric. They are preparing for a future in which House Valmont has only one dominant heir. Cedric frowned. And you think they'll fight for it? I think they already have. The king's request. Cedric looked at the documents. Why tell me? Because I need someone who isn't blinded by ambition. Cedric gave a faint smile. You're assuming I'm not ambitious. The king chuckled. Everyone is ambitious. He leaned back. The difference is what they are willing to sacrifice for it. Cedric didn't answer. The king continued. I don't want House Valmont to collapse. Then what do you want me to do? Watch. Cedric raised an eyebrow. That's all. For now. Leaving the palace. When Cedric left the throne room, the palace corridors felt completely different. Before, he had seen grandeur. Now, he saw factions. Every conversation seemed suspicious. Every smile seemed calculated. Every noble seemed to be watching someone else. A palace attendant bowed. Lord Cedric. Cedric returned the gesture. As he walked away, the attendant immediately whispered to another servant. That's the Lord of Ashfall. I know. He's the one the king summoned privately. Their voices faded behind him. The capital's smile. Outside the palace, the capital was alive. Markets overflowed with people. Carriages filled the streets. Street performers entertained crowds. Nobles walked beneath expensive umbrellas. Restaurants and shops displayed beautiful goods. The city looked prosperous. Perfect. But Cedric had begun noticing things beneath the surface. A beggar sleeping beside a fountain. Children selling flowers. Farmers struggling to move through crowded streets. Workers carrying heavy loads for wealthy merchants. The capital was prosperous, but not everyone shared that prosperity. A familiar voice. Cedric. He stopped. A young nobleman approached. It was Lord Julian Ardent. The same nobleman who had visited Ashfall. Cedric smiled. You're here. I live here. Right. Julian laughed. You look troubled. Cedric looked around. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who has been watching you. Cedric sighed. That's becoming a problem. Lunch in the capital. Julian invited Cedric to a quiet restaurant. For the first time in days, Cedric was able to sit without reading reports. They ordered lunch. Julian leaned back. So, how was the king? Cedric looked at him. You already know I met him. Everyone knows. Cedric sighed. Of course. Julian smiled. The capital has a way of knowing things before they happen. The nobles arrive. Halfway through lunch, 3 noblemen entered. The moment they saw Cedric, they changed direction. One approached. Lord Cedric. Cedric stood politely. Good afternoon. The nobleman smiled. I've heard wonderful things about Ashfall. Thank you. We would be honored to establish a trade partnership. Cedric smiled. We can discuss it later. The nobleman nodded. Of course. Then he leaned closer. I hope you'll remember who welcomed you first. Cedric frowned slightly. The nobleman returned to his table. Julian quietly laughed. That was fast. What? Someone just tried to buy your friendship. Cedric looked at him. And you think that's funny? In the capital. Julian shrugged. It's normal. Another invitation. By the afternoon, Cedric had received 6 invitations. A noble banquet, a merchant dinner, a private political gathering, a hunting event, a meeting with several academy scholars, and 1 invitation from a noble house he had never met. Julian looked at the stack. They're fighting over you already. Cedric frowned. I haven't even done anything. That's exactly why. The 4 brothers. That evening, Cedric returned to the Valmont residence. His brothers were already there. The eldest stood near the fireplace. The second sat at the table. The third was reading. The fourth was cleaning his sword. Cedric entered. You're all here. The second brother smiled. We're family. Cedric looked around. It doesn't feel like it. The fourth brother stopped cleaning his sword. Still suspicious. Cedric smiled faintly. Shouldn't I be? Dinner. The meal began quietly. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, the second brother raised his glass. To Cedric. Cedric looked at him. To what? Your success. The eldest brother glanced at him. The second continued. You've made quite a name for yourself. Cedric took a sip of water. I've been busy. We heard. The third brother finally spoke. Ashfall's refugee program has received royal support. Cedric nodded. Yes. Impressive. The fourth brother scoffed. Or reckless. Cedric looked at him. Why? You're taking responsibility for people who aren't yours. Cedric answered calmly. They're people. The fourth brother laughed. That's not an answer. It is to me. Silence. The real question. The eldest brother finally spoke. What do you want, Cedric? Cedric looked at him. What do you mean? You've built Ashfall. You've gained the king's attention. People admire you. Merchants want your friendship. The academy wants your cooperation. He leaned forward. So what do you want? Cedric thought for a moment. A peaceful life. The second brother laughed. That's it. Yes. The eldest brother studied him. You don't want political power. No. Influence. No. Position. No. Cedric looked toward the window. I just want Ashfall to remain peaceful. A dangerous answer. The brothers exchanged glances. The third brother spoke quietly. That's difficult. Cedric looked at him. Why? Because people with power rarely get to choose whether they become involved. Cedric understood. He had heard the same thing from the king. The capital's game. Later that night, Cedric walked through the residence alone. He passed portraits of generations of Valmont ancestors. Dukes, generals, advisors, politicians, king's companions. Every portrait represented someone who had influenced the kingdom. Cedric stopped before an empty frame. A new portrait was being prepared. He wondered whose face would eventually occupy it. A brother's warning. The third brother found him. You should leave. Cedric looked at him. What? The capital. Why? You don't belong here. Cedric smiled. I've noticed. The third brother shook his head. I'm serious. He stepped closer. The others will try to recruit you. And you. I don't want you on my side. Cedric looked surprised. Then why warn me? The third brother hesitated. Because. He looked away. I don't want to see you destroyed. The truth behind the family. Cedric stared at him. Are you involved in the sabotage? The third brother's eyes widened. No. Cedric watched him carefully. Then who is? I don't know. Do you know which brother is planning something? The third brother remained silent. That silence was enough. Cedric understood. You know something. The third brother finally whispered. I know everyone is lying. The ballroom. The next evening, Cedric attended a royal reception. He had no choice. The king himself had requested his presence. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers. Music filled the air. Nobles danced. Servants carried expensive wine. Everyone smiled. Everyone bowed. Everyone watched. Cedric remembered Julian's words. The capital has a way of knowing things before they happen. A noblewoman approached. Lord Cedric. Yes. Would you honor me with a dance? Cedric hesitated. Then accepted. As they moved across the ballroom, she whispered. Your brother is gaining support. Cedric almost missed a step. Which one? She smiled. That is the question everyone is asking. Behind the curtains, across the ballroom, the four brothers watched, each surrounded by different groups. The eldest with traditional nobles. The second with merchants. The third with scholars. the fourth with military officers. Cedric stood alone, yet somehow, everyone's eyes were on him. The king's observation. From the balcony above, the king watched the ballroom. His advisor stood beside him. He's becoming the center of attention. The king nodded, without trying. That's dangerous. Yes. Should we stop it? The king shook his head. No. Why? The king looked toward Cedric. Because the most dangerous person in a political game is often the person who doesn't want to play. The letter. Near midnight, Cedric returned to his room. A sealed envelope waited on his desk. No royal seal, no family crest, no signature. He opened it. Inside was a single sentence. If you want to know which brother ordered the sabotage, come to the old chapel tomorrow night. Cedric stared at the message. He didn't know who sent it. He didn't know whether it was a trap. But he knew one thing. Someone inside House Valmont was finally ready to reveal the truth. And tomorrow night, Cedric would have to decide whether he was willing to listen. Chapter 13. Masks of Nobility. The old chapel stood at the edge of the capital. It had been abandoned for decades. No priests, no worshippers, no candles burning in its windows. Only cracked stone walls and a weathered bell tower overlooking the city. Cedric arrived shortly before midnight. He had spent the entire evening wondering whether coming was a mistake. Perhaps it was a trap. Perhaps one of his brothers had sent the letter. Perhaps someone wanted him frightened. But there was only one way to find out. He pushed open the chapel door. Someone was waiting. A single candle burned near the altar. A figure stood beside it. You came. Cedric immediately recognized the voice. His eyes narrowed. Julian. Lord Julian Ardent stepped into the light. Cedric relaxed slightly. You sent the letter. Yes. Why? Julian looked toward the empty chapel. Because there are things I couldn't safely tell you at the palace. Cedric crossed his arms. Then tell me the truth about the sabotage. Julian lowered his voice. The evidence you found is genuine. Cedric's expression hardened. House Valmont is involved. Yes. Which brother? Julian hesitated. I don't know. Cedric frowned. Then what do you know? Someone inside House Valmont authorized payments to the intermediaries. But the order was deliberately routed through several merchant companies. Cedric understood. So nobody can trace it. Exactly. Julian handed him a small document. This was recovered from a merchant office. Cedric opened it. It contained coded payments, dates, locations, names, and one phrase repeated several times. Destabilize Ashfall. Cedric's hand tightened around the paper. What was the purpose? Julian answered quietly. To make the king believe Ashfall was becoming unstable. Why? Because if Ashfall becomes politically valuable. He looked directly at Cedric. You become politically valuable. The real threat. Cedric stared at the document. I don't want political power. I know. Then why would they care? Julian smiled sadly. That's exactly why. Cedric looked confused. The people trust someone who doesn't appear to want power. And that makes you dangerous to people who desperately want it. Returning to the palace. The next morning, Cedric returned to the palace. He had barely stepped through the entrance when an attendant approached. Lord Cedric. Yes. Several nobles have requested your presence. Cedric sighed. How many? 7. Julian, walking behind him, laughed. Yesterday it was 6. Cedric looked at him. That's not funny. It is a little. The first invitation. The first gathering was hosted by an ancient noble family. Their estate was magnificent. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, paintings covering every wall. Cedric was greeted warmly. Too warmly. Lord Cedric, we've heard so much about you. Ashfall is truly remarkable. Your leadership is inspiring. Cedric smiled politely. Thank you. But he remembered something. Everyone in the room had criticized Ashfall months earlier. Now, they were suddenly his friends. The hidden price. Dinner was served. Fine food. Expensive wine. Soft music. Then the host finally spoke. Lord Cedric. Yes, we would like to support Ashfall's expansion. Cedric waited. We can provide financing. For new roads. New buildings. Additional trade. Cedric nodded. That's generous. The nobleman smiled. In exchange. There it was. Cedric already knew. We would appreciate exclusive administrative rights over several trade routes. Cedric placed his glass down. No. The smile disappeared. A polite refusal. The nobleman remained courteous. Perhaps you misunderstood. I didn't. Ashfall needs investment. We already have investment. You could become considerably wealthier. Cedric smiled. We already have enough. The nobleman's expression tightened. You could have much more. Cedric stood. I don't want more. He bowed politely. Thank you for dinner. And left. The second gathering. That afternoon, Cedric attended a meeting with several academy scholars. This gathering felt different. They genuinely wanted to discuss Ashfall schools. Agriculture, medicine, engineering. The conversation was productive, until one scholar asked, would you support the Academy's preferred candidate in the upcoming royal advisory appointment? Cedric paused. I don't know any candidates. The scholar smiled. You will. Cedric understood. Even education was being pulled into politics. The third invitation. That evening, Cedric attended a military reception. He immediately felt uncomfortable. Generals, knights, military nobles, weapons displayed along the walls. One officer approached. Lord Cedric. Yes, I've heard Ashfall has fewer soldiers than most frontier territories. That's true. You should increase your forces. We have enough. The officer laughed. Every lord says that before war. Cedric looked at him. Are you expecting one? The officer smiled. Not yet. The four brothers. Later that night, Cedric found his brothers gathered in another room. Each had attended different political meetings. Each had gained new allies. The eldest approached him. How was your day? Interesting. The second laughed. That's one word for it. The third watched Cedric carefully. The fourth leaned against the wall. You've been invited everywhere. Cedric smiled. So have you. The masks. The eldest brother raised his glass. Welcome to the capital. Cedric looked around. What do you mean? This is how things work here. He gestured toward the palace beyond the windows. Everyone smiles. Everyone offers friendship. Everyone expects something. Cedric nodded. I noticed. The eldest smiled. Good. A private conversation. Later, the eldest brother approached Cedric alone. You've rejected several offers. Cedric nodded. I didn't like their conditions. You're making enemies. I expected that. The eldest brother studied him. Do you know what happens to nobles who refuse too many powerful people? They become unpopular. They become isolated. Cedric looked at him. Or independent. The eldest brother smiled. Perhaps. The fourth brother's challenge. The fourth brother suddenly entered. Enough. The eldest turned. What? Stop pretending. The fourth looked directly at Cedric. You know what everyone wants. Cedric remained calm. Do I? They want Ashfall. Cedric's expression hardened. They want control of it. Yes. Then why are you telling me? The fourth brother hesitated. Because. He looked away. I don't want them controlling it either. A strange alliance. Cedric looked between his brothers. For a moment, they almost seemed united. Almost. Then the second brother entered. He smiled. How touching. The fourth immediately glared at him. Don't. The second laughed. Four brothers finally protecting the same territory. He looked at Cedric. Perhaps we should celebrate. Cedric didn't smile. Because he could feel it. Something was wrong. The king's advisor. Later that evening, the king's advisor privately approached Cedric. You are learning quickly. Cedric looked at him. About what? The capital. The advisor smiled. Never trust a noble who tells you exactly what they want. Cedric nodded. And what about those who don't? Trust them even less. The game. The advisor continued. The nobles aren't simply trying to gain control of Ashfall. They are testing you. Testing what? Your values. Your alliances. Your weaknesses. He looked toward the ballroom. Everyone wants to know what it would take to make Cedric Valmont compromise. Cedric's expression became cold. And if they can't, the advisor smiled, then they will try to find something you cannot afford to lose. The threat. Cedric immediately thought of Ashfall. His people. The refugees. The school. The clinic. The council. Everything he had built. The advisor noticed his expression. Exactly. Cedric's hands tightened. They wouldn't. The advisor answered quietly. Never assume powerful people have limits. The royal banquet. That night, the king hosted a grand banquet. Every major noble family was present. The four Valmont brothers stood together. Cedric was positioned near the king. Whispers spread immediately. Why is Cedric beside his majesty? What did they discuss? Is the king considering him? Perhaps he's being positioned for something. Cedric heard every word. He ignored them. The king's toast. The king raised his glass. To the future of our kingdom. Everyone stood. Glasses rose. Smiles appeared. Applause filled the hall. Cedric looked around. Hundreds of faces. Hundreds of ambitions. Hundreds of hidden agendas. The capital's smile was beautiful. And terrifying. The unexpected announcement. Then the king spoke again. There is another matter. The ballroom became silent. The kingdom has benefited greatly from the development of Ashfall. Everyone looked toward Cedric. Therefore, the king paused. I have decided to formally recognize Ashfall as a royal frontier development territory. Gasps spread through the room. Cedric's eyes widened. The king continued. This designation will grant Ashfall direct access to royal development funds, expanded trade protections, and administrative independence. Silence. Then, the nobles erupted into whispers. The Valmont brothers. The eldest brother's expression became unreadable. The second looked stunned. The third immediately began calculating the implications. The fourth smiled faintly. Cedric looked at the king. Your Majesty. The king simply said. You've earned it. The storm breaks. But across the ballroom, one nobleman quietly stood. His face was cold. He whispered to another. If Ashfall becomes independent, Cedric will no longer need House Valmont. The other man replied. Then House Valmont must decide whether Cedric is still family. Cedric didn't hear them, but his brothers did, and for the first time, the four brothers realized the same thing. Ashfall was no longer simply a territory. It was becoming a power of its own. And Cedric was standing at its center. Chapter 14, House Valmont divided. The morning after the royal banquet, House Valmont was no longer pretending everything was normal. The king's recognition of Ashfall had changed the balance of power. Cedric's territory was now protected directly by the crown. His influence had grown, and more importantly, every noble in the capital now understood that Cedric had become a political force without even trying to become one. That frightened people, but it frightened his brothers most of all. The family meeting. The four brothers were summoned to their father's study. The room was unusually quiet. Their father sat behind his desk. 4 documents were arranged before him. One for each son. The king has recognized Ashfall as a royal frontier development territory. The second brother's jaw tightened. The eldest remained expressionless. The third carefully studied the document. The fourth leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Their father continued. This changes the position of House Valmont. No one answered. Cedric now has direct royal protection. The second brother finally spoke. Which means he no longer needs House Valmont. Their father looked at him. That is not what the decree says. It doesn't need to. The second brother's voice was calm. Everyone knows what it means. The first argument. The eldest brother looked toward him. Stop. The second brother turned. Why? Because you're making this personal. It became personal the moment father started treating Cedric differently. The room fell silent. The fourth brother frowned. Father isn't treating him differently. The second brother laughed. Really? He pointed toward the royal decree. Royal protection. Royal funding. Administrative independence. A seat beside the king. Tell me that isn't different. The fourth brother's expression hardened. Cedric earned it. The second brother looked at him. You sound like you've already chosen. The first faction. The eldest brother finally spoke. Enough. Everyone turned toward him. He remained calm. If we continue arguing like this, we'll destroy the family ourselves. The second brother smiled. Perhaps the family was already divided. The eldest ignored him. House Valmont needs stability. He looked toward the third and fourth brothers. Our father's health is declining. The succession will eventually become a question. And when that happens, he paused. The family must remain united. The second brother shook his head. United under whom? Silence. The question had finally been spoken aloud. The question of succession. Their father slowly stood. My succession has not been decided. The second brother looked directly at him. Then decide it. The eldest brother's expression changed. That's enough. No. The second brother stood. Everyone knows what you're thinking. He pointed toward the eldest. You're the oldest. Then toward the third. He's gathering scholars and administrators. Then toward the fourth. He's building relationships with the military. He finally looked toward the empty chair representing Cedric's place in the family. And Cedric, he smiled bitterly, has the king. The room became silent. Their father stared at his sons. For years, their rivalry had been hidden beneath manners. Now, the masks were coming off. The eldest's position. The eldest brother spoke first. I don't intend to fight my brothers. The second brother laughed. That's not the same as saying you won't compete. The eldest looked at him. House Valmont needs someone capable of governing it. And you believe that's you. I believe experience matters. The second brother's smile disappeared. Then say it. The eldest brother remained silent. The fourth brother answered for him. He thinks he should inherit. The eldest didn't deny it. The second brother's faction. The second brother walked toward the window. Then I'll be honest too. He turned around. I intend to compete. The third brother frowned. With merchants. With people who understand how the kingdom actually functions. The second brother began listing his supporters. Several major trading houses. Bankers. Manufacturers. Merchant guilds. Younger nobles who wanted economic reforms. They believe House Valmont needs to become more powerful. The eldest replied. They want to control you. They want opportunity. They want access to the family. And, the second brother smiled. Perhaps that's what power is. The third brother's choice. Everyone turned toward the third brother. He had remained silent throughout the argument. The eldest asked, and you? The third brother closed the document in front of him. I don't want the title. The second brother raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? Information. Silence. The third continued. House Valmont is surrounded by people who lie. Nobles. Merchants. Officials. Even family members. He looked at his brothers. I want to know the truth before anyone makes a decision. The second brother smiled. So you're building an information network. The third didn't deny it. The fourth brother. Finally, their attention turned toward the fourth brother. He had been silent. The eldest asked, and you? The fourth looked at each of them. I don't care about the succession. The second laughed. Of course you don't. I don't. The fourth's voice became colder. I care about protecting the family. The second brother scoffed. With soldiers, if necessary. The fourth brother had already gained the loyalty of several knights and military officers. Not enough to command an army, but enough to make people take him seriously. The eldest frowned. Military power shouldn't be used in a family dispute. The fourth answered. Then don't turn the family dispute into a war. The line had been drawn. Their father slowly looked at his sons. 4 paths. 4 different visions. The eldest wanted stability and tradition. The second wanted economic power and expansion. The third wanted information and influence through knowledge. The fourth wanted strength and security. And somewhere outside the room, Cedric remained apart from all of them. Their father spoke quietly. And Cedric. Everyone became silent. What does he want? No one answered. Because they all knew. Cedric had never asked for the succession. He had never requested political power. He had only wanted Ashfall. Cedric's position. Later that afternoon, Cedric was informed of the family meeting. He read the report quietly. Greta watched him. They're dividing. Cedric nodded. Yes. Which side are you joining? Cedric looked at her. None. Greta smiled faintly. I thought so. Cedric folded the report. I won't compete with my brothers. What if they compete with you? Then I'll defend Ashfall. And if they ask you to choose? Cedric looked toward the town. I won't. The first alliances. That evening, the political lines became clearer. Several traditional noble houses visited the eldest brother. They pledged support. Merchant families began meeting with the second. Academy scholars and royal administrators sought private conversations with the third. Military officers gathered around the fourth. None of them openly declared allegiance. There were no banners, no public announcements, no formal declarations. But behind closed doors, everyone was choosing. The capital watches. The nobles of the capital quickly noticed. At dinners, people sat according to faction. At banquets, certain families stopped speaking to others. Business partnerships shifted. Marriage negotiations changed. Political invitations were redirected. Even seemingly innocent conversations became dangerous. One wrong word could reveal which brother someone supported. Cedric refuses an offer. One evening, a representative of the eldest brother approached Cedric. My lord. Cedric looked at him. My brother would appreciate your support. Cedric already knew what was coming. He believes your influence would strengthen the family. Cedric smiled. Tell him I appreciate the thought. And your answer? No. The representative looked surprised. May I ask why? Cedric answered honestly. Because supporting one brother against another doesn't strengthen the family. It divides it. The second brother tries. The following day, the second brother personally approached Cedric. You rejected my brother. Cedric nodded. You'll reject me too. Yes. The second brother laughed. At least you're consistent. He studied Cedric. You could have enormous influence. I don't want it. You already have it. Cedric looked at him. Then I have to be careful how I use it. The second brother's smile faded. You really mean that? Yes. A quiet warning. That evening, the third brother visited Cedric. Unlike the others, he didn't ask for support. He simply said, be careful. Cedric looked at him. About what? Everyone. Cedric smiled. That's not very specific. The third brother looked toward the palace. Someone is encouraging this division. Cedric's expression changed. What do you mean? I'm not sure yet. Do you think it's one of our brothers? The third brother shook his head. I don't know. Then he added, and that's what worries me. The fourth brother, arrived later. He stood beside Cedric without speaking. For a while, neither said anything. Finally, Cedric asked, how bad is it? The fourth brother answered honestly. Bad. Your faction. I don't have a faction. Cedric looked at him. Neither do I. The fourth brother smiled faintly. Maybe that's why I came. Two brothers who don't want the throne. Cedric looked at him. Do you think they're going to fight? The fourth brother hesitated. Not yet. But, if everyone keeps choosing sides. He looked toward the distant Valmont estate. Eventually someone will have to. Cedric remained silent. The fourth brother continued. When that happens. What? I don't want you caught between us. Cedric looked at him. You should be worried about yourself. The fourth brother smiled. I am. The family dinner. That night, the entire family gathered for dinner. The atmosphere was completely different. The same table, the same silverware, the same family portraits, but everyone now knew where everyone else stood. The eldest sat with traditional nobles waiting outside. The second had merchants gathering at his residence. The third had scholars and administrators feeding him information. The fourth had knights loyal to him. And Cedric had Ashfall. Their father looked around the table. My sons. No one spoke. I never wanted this. The eldest looked down. The second said nothing. The third closed his eyes. The fourth clenched his fist. Their father continued. Power has a way of turning brothers into enemies. Cedric finally spoke. Then don't let it. Everyone looked at him. Cedric remained calm. We're still brothers. The second brother gave a bitter smile. For now. Cedric looked at him. That's a choice. The first irreversible step. The dinner ended without an argument. But after everyone left, the second brother received a private message. A merchant family had officially pledged its support to him. Not verbally. Not privately. In writing. A formal political alliance. He stared at the document. He knew what signing it meant. Once he accepted, there would be no returning to neutrality. He hesitated. Then, he signed. Across the estate, the eldest brother received news of the alliance. His expression became cold. So he's made his choice. His advisor asked, should we respond? The eldest looked toward the document. Not yet. But, not yet. He slowly closed his eyes. Once we begin, we may not be able to stop. 4 paths. That night, 4 brothers stood in 4 different parts of the Valmont estate. The eldest looked toward the ancestral portraits. The second stood among merchant contracts. The third studied a wall covered with names and connections. The fourth trained alone in the courtyard. And Cedric was far away, standing on Ashfall's eastern hill, looking at the lights of the town he had chosen. 5 brothers, 5 different futures, but only one family. The first crack. Before dawn, a final report reached Cedric. The second brother had formally accepted his first political alliance. The eldest was gathering his own supporters. The third was investigating both factions. The fourth was strengthening his protective network. The family had not declared war. No swords had been drawn. No armies had marched. No blood had been spilled. But something irreversible had happened. The brothers had stopped pretending they were simply disagreeing. They were now choosing sides. And Cedric still stood in the middle, refusing to choose. For now. Chapter 15, the first attempt. The political lines had been drawn. The eldest brother had begun gathering traditional noble families. The second had secured the support of powerful merchants. The third was quietly building an information network. The fourth had surrounded himself with loyal knights. And Cedric had chosen none of them. For the moment, the family remained intact. But the distance between the brothers was growing. And someone was watching. A quiet morning. The capital woke beneath a clear sky. The fourth brother had spent the morning training with several knights in the Valmont courtyard. He moved quickly, precisely, without unnecessary movements. One of the knights lowered his sword. "You've been distracted lately." The fourth brother wiped sweat from his forehead. "I'm fine." The knight shook his head. "You've looked behind you 6 times. The fourth brother glanced toward the gate. "Nothing. I have reasons." The strange letter. An hour later, a servant delivered a letter. No family seal, no noble crest, only his name. The fourth brother opened it. "Your brother Cedric is in danger. Someone intends to move against him tonight. If you want to know who, come to the Eastern Gardens alone." He stared at the message. His expression hardened. It was obviously suspicious. But Cedric, that name was enough. A decision. The fourth brother immediately went to the eldest. "I received this." The eldest read the letter. "It's a trap. I know." "Then don't go." The fourth brother folded it. "If someone is targeting Cedric, we need proof." The eldest grabbed his arm. "And if they are targeting you?" The fourth brother looked at him. "Then you'll know." The eldest's expression darkened. "You aren't going alone. The brothers follow." The eldest secretly sent 2 trusted knights. The third brother learned about the movement through his information network. The second heard about it through a merchant contact. Within an hour, 3 brothers knew the fourth was heading toward the Eastern Gardens. None of them trusted the others enough to ask why. And none realized. Someone had been waiting for exactly this reaction. The Eastern Gardens. The fourth brother arrived shortly before sunset. The gardens were empty. Too empty. He walked slowly between the hedges. "Come out." Nothing. He reached the fountain at the center. A second letter waited on the stone. He opened it. "You were warned. Leave House Valmont behind." His hand tightened around the paper. Then, he heard footsteps. The first attack. A blade came from behind. The fourth brother twisted aside. The sword passed inches from his neck. He drew his own weapon immediately. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Masked, armed, silent. The fourth brother backed toward the fountain. "So that's your plan." One attacker charged. He blocked. Another came from the side. He ducked. The third moved behind him. The fourth brother kicked backward, sending the man crashing into the fountain. But more footsteps sounded. 4, 5. There were more than he expected. The assassins. The attackers weren't ordinary criminals. Their movements were disciplined, coordinated. They fought like trained killers. The fourth brother understood immediately. This wasn't intimidation. They had come to kill him. He fought desperately. One blade cut across his arm. Another struck his shoulder. He staggered. Then an attacker raised a dagger toward his chest. The eldest arrives. Steel rang through the garden. The dagger was knocked away. The eldest brother stood between them. "You made one mistake." The assassins froze. "You assumed he was alone." The 2 brothers fought side by side. For the first time in years. They moved as they had when they were children. Without words. Without hesitation. The eldest blocked. The fourth attacked. One assassin fell. Another fled. The remaining attackers scattered into the darkness. Too late. The third brother arrived moments later with his guards. He saw the blood. "You're injured." The fourth brother looked at his shoulder. "It's nothing." The eldest stared at him. "That's not nothing." The third examined the scene. There were at least 7. The eldest frowned. 7. The third nodded. And they were trained. Silence. This wasn't a noble argument anymore. Someone had attempted to murder one of them. The evidence. One of the assassins had dropped something. A small black coin. The third brother picked it up. A symbol was engraved on one side. A ledger. And beneath it, a single letter. V. The fourth brother stared. The black ledger. The third brother's expression changed. "You've heard of it." "Not directly." The eldest looked at both of them. "What is the black ledger?" The third brother hesitated. "A network." "What kind?" "Criminal." The realization. The second brother suddenly arrived. He had followed another route after hearing about the attack. What happened? Nobody answered. He saw the blood on his brother's coat. His expression changed. "Who did this?" The fourth brother looked at him. "We don't know." The second stared at the black coin. Then, he went pale. I know that symbol. Everyone turned toward him. Where? I've seen it in merchant records. He swallowed. They're not simple assassins. What are they? The second brother answered quietly. Professional contractors. The question. The eldest brother's voice became cold. Who hired them? Nobody knew. But the implications were terrifying. Someone had enough money to hire professional killers. Someone had enough information to know the fourth brother's movements. Someone knew about the family's internal divisions. And someone wanted one of the brothers dead. Cedric hears. Far away. Cedric received the news. He was in Ashfall reviewing construction plans when a royal messenger arrived. My lord. Cedric immediately noticed his expression. What happened? Your brother was attacked. Cedric froze. Which one? The fourth. The room became silent. Cedric stood immediately. Is he alive? Yes. How badly injured? His wounds are serious, but he is expected to recover. Cedric exhaled. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, who attacked him? We don't know. The family gathers. Cedric wanted to leave immediately. But before he could, another message arrived. This one was from the eldest brother. Do not come to the capital. We don't know who is behind this. If you come now, you may become the next target. Cedric stared at the letter. His hands tightened. His brother had been attacked. And now they were telling him to stay away. The fourth brother's room. That night, the fourth brother lay in bed. His wounds had been treated. The eldest sat beside him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, the fourth said, "You saved me." The eldest looked at him. Obviously, you could have been killed. So could you. The fourth smiled faintly. Thank you. The eldest looked away. Don't make me hear that again. A family without masks. Later, the second and third brothers joined them. For once, nobody argued. Nobody discussed succession. Nobody talked about political alliances. They simply sat together. 4 brothers, 1 family, 1 attack, and 1 terrible realization. Their rivalry had created an opportunity for someone else. The first accusation. The second brother finally spoke. Someone knew exactly where he would be. The third nodded. Someone also knew about the letter. The eldest frowned. So someone inside the family leaked information. Silence. The fourth looked at his brothers. Are you accusing one of us? No. The eldest shook his head. But we can't ignore the possibility. Cedric's message. Near midnight, a final letter arrived from Ashfall. It was from Cedric. Only a few lines. I don't care which faction you support. I don't care who wins the succession. But none of you are dying because of it. Whatever happens next, remember that you're brothers. The fourth brother read the message twice. Then handed it to the eldest. The eldest read it. Then the second. Then the third. Nobody laughed. Nobody mocked Cedric. For the first time, all 4 understood exactly what he was trying to say. The irreversible change. The assassination attempt changed everything. Before, the brothers had been competing. After, they became suspicious. The eldest increased his security. The second began investigating his merchant contacts. The third expanded his information network. The fourth surrounded himself with loyal knights. And Cedric was now watching from Ashfall. The family had crossed a line. Someone had proven that the rivalry could become deadly. The hidden hand. Meanwhile, in a dark room somewhere in the capital, a masked man placed the black coin onto a table. A second figure stood across from him. The attempt failed. I know. The fourth brother survived. I know. Should we try again? The second figure shook his head. No. Why? A faint smile appeared. Because the first attempt gave us something more valuable than his death. What? Fear. The figure looked toward the distant Valmont estate. Now, let's see what the brothers do with it. The first blood had been spilled. The family had not declared war. But the rules had changed. And from this moment forward, every brother would have to wonder whether the person standing beside him was truly family, or simply another piece on someone else's board. Chapter 16. Ashfall under threat. The assassination attempt changed everything. For the first time, House Valmont's rivalry had produced blood. The fourth brother had survived. The assassins had escaped. And no one knew who had ordered the attack. Cedric wanted to return to the capital immediately. But the king had ordered him to remain in Ashfall. Then, unexpectedly, a second royal message arrived. Lord Cedric, your presence in the capital is requested. There are matters concerning the attack that cannot be discussed through correspondence. Come immediately. Cedric stared at the letter. The timing was terrible, but refusing the king was impossible. Leaving Ashfall. Before dawn, Cedric gathered the council. Greta immediately understood. You're leaving. Only temporarily. Oswald frowned. Because of your brother. Cedric nodded. And because the king wants answers. Greta crossed her arms. Then who governs Ashfall while you're gone? Cedric looked around the table. You do. Greta blinked. Me. All of you. The council's authority. Cedric placed a sealed document on the table. I've already signed it. Oswald opened it. It granted the council temporary authority over Ashfall's administration. Trade. Security. The refugee district. The school. The clinic. Public funds. Everything. Greta looked at Cedric. You really trust us? Cedric smiled. I wouldn't have built the council if I didn't. The final instructions. Cedric pointed toward Oswald. Keep the market stable. Oswald nodded. Greta, security. Already handled. Dr. Miriam, medicine. I'll monitor the clinic. Teacher Elena, the school. Understood. Master Rowan. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Don't blow anything up. Rowan looked offended. I only did that twice. Everyone laughed. For a moment, the tension disappeared. Then Cedric became serious. If anything happens, don't wait for me. Greta looked at him. Understood. The capital. Cedric arrived in the capital 2 days later. The city felt different. The assassination attempt had become the subject of countless rumors. Some claimed the fourth brother was dead. Others claimed the attack had been ordered by a rival noble house. Some even claimed House Valmont itself was responsible. Cedric ignored the rumors. He went directly to the palace. The king's questions. The king received him privately. You came quickly. You summoned me. The king nodded. Your brother survived. I know. And the assassins. Several escaped. Cedric's expression hardened. Do you know who hired them? The king looked toward the window. No. Cedric frowned. But you know something. The king smiled faintly. You've become rather difficult to deceive. Cedric didn't smile. Your Majesty. The king sighed. The attack was not isolated. The wider network. The king showed Cedric several reports. Similar attacks had occurred across the kingdom. Not assassinations. Not always. Sometimes warehouses were burned. Sometimes merchants disappeared. Sometimes political documents were forged. Sometimes local officials were threatened. Cedric studied the reports. This is coordinated. Yes. By whom? We're still investigating. Cedric looked at the map. The incidents formed a pattern. And Ashfall sat directly in the middle of several important routes. Meanwhile in Ashfall, while Cedric was in the capital, the first problem appeared. A merchant caravan arrived with forged royal documents. The documents claimed that several of Ashfall's trade privileges had been suspended. The merchants demanded immediate payment of new tariffs. Greta refused. These aren't real. The caravan leader smiled. How can you be certain? Oswald stepped forward. Because the royal seal is wrong. The merchant's smile disappeared. The first test. Greta ordered the caravan held outside the gates until the documents could be verified. The merchants protested. Some threatened legal action. Others threatened to leave. Greta remained calm. Then leave. The caravan leader stared at her. You'll regret this. Greta smiled. Probably. She turned away. But I won't regret protecting Ashfall. The second attack. That night, the eastern granary caught fire. The guards discovered it before the flames spread. But several sacks of grain were destroyed. Oswald immediately arrived. How did they get inside? The guard shook his head. We don't know. Oswald inspected the lock. It hadn't been broken. Someone had opened it. With a key. The council takes control. Greta called an emergency meeting. We have an infiltrator. Oswald nodded. And they're testing our response. Miriam looked worried. First the trade documents. Then the granary. Elena added. They may target the school next. Master Rowan frowned. Or the clinic. Greta stood. Then we protect all of them. No Cedric. For the first time, they had to make decisions without Cedric. No one could ask him. No one could wait for his approval. The council had to trust itself. Greta looked around the table. We do this together. Oswald nodded. Together. The school. The next morning, teacher Elena noticed a stranger near the school. He claimed to be a royal inspector. Elena asked for his identification. He produced a document. She studied it, then smiled. I'm sorry. The man frowned. For what? The Royal Academy changed its inspection schedule yesterday. His expression changed. Elena immediately signaled the guards. The man fled. The clinic. At the clinic, Dr. Miriam discovered that several medicine containers had been replaced. Not stolen. Replaced. The labels looked identical, but the contents were wrong. Miriam's blood ran cold. If she hadn't checked, people could have been poisoned. She immediately locked the medical storage room. Nobody enters without me. The workshop. Master Rowan found another problem. Several tools had been tampered with. A pressure valve had been loosened. If one of the machines had been activated, someone could have been seriously injured. Rowan stared at the mechanism. They're getting bolder. The refugee district. Then, a rumor began spreading through the eastern district. The royal government was going to force the refugees to leave. Within hours, panic spread. Families packed their belongings. Children cried. Some people prepared to leave Ashfall voluntarily. Greta immediately understood. This is the attack. Oswald nodded. They don't need to destroy the district. They only need the people to lose faith. The council responds. Greta gathered the refugees. She didn't hide the truth. Someone is spreading false information. A man shouted. How do we know you're telling the truth? Greta answered honestly. You don't. The crowd became silent. But you can check. She opened the official documents. The royal decree. The land grants. The settlement agreements. Everything is public. A former farmer stepped forward. I've seen these documents before. He looked at the crowd. They're real. The rumor dies. Slowly. People calmed down. Families unpacked their belongings. The children returned to school. The workshops reopened. The district survived. But the council understood something important. The attacks were not random. Someone was testing every part of Ashfall. Oswald's discovery. That evening, Oswald found a pattern. Every attack had occurred within hours of a particular type of communication. Trade documents, royal notices, medical shipments, school inspections, refugee announcements. Someone was monitoring Ashfall's correspondence. Greta frowned. How? Oswald looked toward the council archives. Someone is reading our messages. The search for the leak. The council quietly investigated. They checked servants, messengers, merchants, guards, officials. Nobody seemed suspicious. Then, Oswald found something. A messenger had delivered 3 different letters to Ashfall under 3 different names. But the handwriting was identical. The messenger didn't exist. Someone had been forging communications. The trap. The council decided to use it. They created 3 false pieces of information. Each was given to a different trusted person. One involved the granary. One involved the clinic. One involved the refugee district. They waited. The next morning, someone attempted to sabotage the granary again. The information had leaked. Oswald smiled grimly. Now we know where it came from. The culprit. The leak wasn't one of the council members. It was a clerk in the administrative office. He was young, terrified, and immediately confessed. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Greta asked. Who paid you? He shook his head. I never saw them. What did they promise? Money. How much? Enough to pay my family's debts. Greta looked at him. Who contacted you? The clerk whispered. A merchant. Another piece of the puzzle. Oswald examined the payment records. The merchant was connected to several companies. Those companies were connected to another trading house. And that trading house had business ties to the capital. The investigation was becoming larger. But the council had achieved something important. They had discovered how the enemy was operating. In the capital, Cedric received the report. He read every page. His expression became increasingly serious. Ashfall had been attacked while he was away. Not once, several times. He immediately stood. I need to return. The king looked at him. Not yet. Cedric frowned. My people are being targeted. I know. Then why keep me here? The king answered quietly. Because that's exactly what they want. Cedric understands. Cedric stared at the king. If I return, the enemy learns that threatening Ashfall can control you. Cedric's expression hardened. And if I stay, your council proves it can protect Ashfall without you. Cedric looked down. He hated the answer. But he knew it was true. The council's victory. That night, Greta stood before the council. We survived. Oswald smiled. We did more than survive. He placed the forged documents on the table. We caught them. Miriam nodded. The clinic is secure. Elena smiled. The school is safe. Rowan crossed his arms. And my workshop is still standing. Greta looked around. Cedric wasn't there. But everyone understood. They were no longer simply Cedric's assistants. They were leaders. A message to Cedric. Greta wrote a letter. Ashfall is safe. We were attacked. We handled it. Don't rush back because you're worried about us. You trusted us to govern without you. Now trust us to keep doing it. She signed it, then handed it to the messenger. Cedric's smile. The letter reached Cedric the following morning. He read it quietly, then smiled. For the first time since leaving Ashfall, he felt relieved, not because the danger had disappeared, but because his people had proven something. Ashfall didn't depend on Cedric anymore. It belonged to everyone. The final warning. Before Cedric could leave the capital, the king summoned him one last time. There is something you should know. Cedric stopped. What? The king handed him a sealed report. The attack on your brother. Cedric opened it. The evidence suggests the assassins were connected to the same network targeting Ashfall. Cedric's eyes narrowed. So the family conflict and the attacks on Ashfall may be connected. Cedric closed the report. The king looked at him. Your family is becoming the center of something much larger. Cedric looked toward the capital skyline. I know. And for the first time, he wondered whether House Valmont was truly the source of the danger. Or whether someone else was using the family's rivalry to set the entire kingdom on fire. Chapter 17. The Price of Ambition. The capital had changed since the assassination attempt. The nobles still smiled. The banquets still continued. The markets still opened every morning. But beneath the polished surface, everyone was choosing sides. House Valmont was no exception. The eldest brother had gathered traditional nobles. The second had secured powerful merchants. The third was collecting information. The fourth had strengthened his military connections. And Cedric remained outside the struggle. For now, the Merchant Alliance. The second brother sat inside a private office overlooking the capital's financial district. 3 merchants sat across from him. We've already pledged our support, one said. The second brother nodded. I appreciate it, but the eldest is gaining ground. Another merchant placed several documents on the table. 6 noble families have joined him. The second brother's expression tightened. 6, 7 by tomorrow, perhaps. Silence. One merchant leaned forward. If his faction continues growing, your position will become difficult. The second brother looked toward the window. He knew they were right. The offer. The oldest merchant spoke carefully. There are ways to slow them down. The second brother looked at him. What kind of ways? Pressure. Political pressure. The merchant smiled faintly. Not necessarily. The second brother understood immediately. You mean criminals? Nobody answered. That silence was enough. The decision. The second brother stood. No. The merchants exchanged glances. We're not criminals. We're businessmen. And I am not going to turn a family disagreement into violence. The merchants nodded. Of course. But after they left, the second brother remained alone. He looked at the documents. 6 noble families. 7 tomorrow. If he did nothing, the eldest would become nearly impossible to challenge. His hand tightened around the paper. The first mistake. That night, the second brother called his private advisor. Do you know anyone who can apply pressure without leaving a trace? The advisor hesitated. Perhaps. I don't want anyone hurt. Understood. I don't want property destroyed. Understood. I only want certain merchants to reconsider their alliances. The advisor looked at him. You understand what you're asking. The second brother remained silent. Finally. Yes. The criminals. 3 days later, a small group of criminals arrived in the capital. They weren't famous. They weren't powerful. But they were experienced. Their leader was a man known only as Rook. He met the second brother's advisor in an abandoned warehouse. We were told the job is simple. It is. Threats. Intimidation. Anything else? No. Rook smiled. Then we'll make sure they understand. The advisor handed him a list. 7 names. All merchants supporting the eldest brother. The first warning. The first merchant received a message. Withdraw your support from House Valmont's eldest son. He laughed. He threw it into the fireplace. The following morning, his warehouse windows had been smashed. Nothing was stolen. No one was injured. Only one message had been painted across the wall. Choose carefully. The second merchant received a different warning. His carriage was followed. Everywhere. To the market. To his home. To his office. Nobody attacked him. Nobody spoke to him. But the message was clear. Someone was watching. By evening, he withdrew his support. The faction reacts. The eldest brother received the news. 2 merchants had abandoned him. He immediately called his advisor. Why? We don't know. Find out. The advisor bowed. We're already investigating. The eldest looked at the list of remaining supporters. This isn't normal political competition. No, it's intimidation. The third brother notices. The third brother received the same reports. He immediately noticed something. Every threatened merchant had one thing in common. They were supporters of the eldest. He opened his private records. Then found another connection. The criminals had recently entered the capital through a merchant route controlled by one of the second brother's allies. His eyes narrowed. Impossible. He checked again. The connection remained. A difficult question. The third brother went directly to the second. You've been busy. The second brother looked up. What does that mean? 3 merchants supporting the eldest have been threatened. The second remained expressionless. And, did you order it? Silence. The second brother slowly stood. Be careful. The third stared at him. I'm asking a question, and I'm telling you to be careful. The confrontation. The third brother placed a document on the table. This group entered the capital through one of your merchant contacts. The second brother looked at it. That proves nothing. No. The third leaned closer. But I know who hired them. The second brother's expression changed. For the first time, the mask slipped. Only for a moment. But the third saw it. You did. The second brother didn't answer. The justification. Finally, the second brother spoke. I didn't order violence. You hired criminals. To frighten merchants. That's violence. I told them nobody was to be hurt. The third brother stared at him. Do you hear yourself? The second slammed his hand against the table. What was I supposed to do? You were losing. I'm still losing. His voice echoed through the room. The eldest has the nobles. The fourth has the knights. The third has information. He looked directly at his brother. And Cedric has the king. He clenched his fists. What do I have? The third answered quietly. Yourself. The line crossed. The second brother turned away. I only needed time. The third shook his head. You crossed a line. I haven't hurt anyone. Not yet. The second looked at him. The third continued. That's how this begins. The fourth brother learns. The information eventually reached the fourth brother. His reaction was immediate. You hired criminals. The second brother refused to answer. The fourth stepped closer. You threatened people. They weren't harmed. That doesn't matter. The fourth's hand moved toward his sword. The eldest immediately intervened. Enough. The fourth glared at the second. If you do this again. The second brother looked back. What? The fourth's expression was cold. Then I'll stop you. The family meeting. For the first time since the assassination attempt. All 4 brothers met privately. The eldest sat at the head of the table. The second remained standing. The third had brought evidence. The fourth looked furious. The eldest spoke. Is it true? The second brother said nothing. Answer me. After a long silence. Yes. The room became completely quiet. The consequences. The eldest brother slowly stood. You hired criminals to threaten my supporters. Yes. Without telling the family. Yes. You risked turning a political rivalry into a criminal conflict. The second brother's expression hardened. I was protecting my position. No. The eldest shook his head. You were protecting your ambition. Cedric's name. The fourth brother looked toward the empty chair. What would Cedric say? Nobody answered. The third finally spoke. He would tell us we're destroying the family. The second brother looked away. The eldest sighed. He'd be right. The criminals return. Meanwhile, Rook returned to the warehouse. His employer's advisor was waiting. The merchants are backing away. Good. Rook smiled. There's a problem. What? The eldest brother is investigating. The advisor frowned. And the third brother knows. Silence. The advisor immediately realized the danger. You need to disappear. Rook laughed. Not yet. He placed the list on the table. There are still 4 names. The next target. One of the remaining merchants was particularly important. He controlled several major trade routes. If he withdrew, the eldest brother's faction would lose a significant source of funding. Rook pointed toward his name. This one. The advisor nodded. Do it. But someone was listening. Neither noticed the figure standing outside the warehouse. A shadow slipped away through the alley. The person carried a small notebook. Inside were names, payments, locations, and one newly added entry. Second brother, confirmed. The price of ambition. Back at the Valmont residence. The second brother sat alone. He looked at his hands. He had wanted power. Not because he hated his brothers. Not because he wanted them destroyed. He simply refused to lose. But now, he had taken the first step into something he could no longer control. The third brother's words returned to him. That's how this begins. A message from Ashfall. That night, a letter arrived from Cedric. The second brother read it privately. I heard the family is becoming more divided. I hope you're all still talking to one another. Whatever happens, don't let ambition make decisions that you can't undo. The second brother stared at the letter. For a moment, he almost confessed everything. Almost. Then he folded the letter. And put it away. The fourth brother's promise. Later that evening, the fourth brother confronted him one final time. If those criminals hurt anyone. The second brother looked at him. They won't. You don't know that. The fourth stepped closer. That's the problem. He lowered his voice. You hired people who don't care about our family. They care about money. And when money isn't enough. The second had no answer. The first irreversible choice. The next morning, the eldest brother officially ended all political cooperation with the second brother's merchant allies. The second responded by withdrawing his support from several family initiatives. The third stopped sharing information with both. The fourth increased his guards around the family estate. No one declared war. No one drew a sword. But the brothers were no longer simply competing. They were protecting themselves from one another. And somewhere in the capital, Rook prepared his next operation. The second brother had wanted to weaken a rival faction. Instead, he had given their enemies something far more valuable. Away inside House Valmont. Chapter 18, A Promise to Protect. The capital had become a place Cedric no longer trusted. Every corridor seemed to contain a secret. Every smiling noble seemed to be measuring him. Every message from House Valmont carried another warning. And now, his brothers were beginning to turn against one another. The second brother had secretly hired criminals. The eldest had discovered the intimidation campaign. The third was gathering evidence. The fourth had threatened to stop the second if he crossed the line again. The family was breaking apart. And Cedric had finally decided that he couldn't simply stand outside and watch. Returning home, Cedric left the capital at dawn. The king did not stop him this time. Before Cedric departed, the king gave him one final warning. Your family is approaching a dangerous point. Cedric nodded. I know. You cannot save everyone. Cedric looked toward the road leading east. Maybe not. Then he smiled faintly. But I'm going to try. Ashfall. After several days, the familiar walls of Ashfall finally appeared. Cedric expected to feel relief. Instead, he felt something warmer. Home. The moment he passed through the gates, people recognized him. Children ran beside the carriage. Farmers waved. Shopkeepers greeted him. The refugee district filled with cheers. Cedric stepped down. Greta was waiting. You took long enough. Cedric smiled. I missed you too. Greta folded her arms. We survived without you. I heard. And, I'm proud. The council. That evening, the entire council gathered. Cedric listened as they explained everything. The forged royal documents. The attempted poisoning. The granary fire. The false rumors. The infiltrator. The merchant connections. And the criminal network. Cedric said nothing until they finished. Then, thank you. Greta frowned. That's all. No. Cedric looked around the table. You protected Ashfall. Oswald smiled. You trusted us. I did. And now, Cedric leaned back. Now I trust you even more. What had changed? Cedric walked through Ashfall the next morning. He noticed things he hadn't seen before. New houses. New shops. New farms. A larger school. An expanded clinic. A new bridge. People who had arrived as refugees were now running businesses. Children who had once been afraid were playing in the streets. Ashfall had continued growing while he was away. Not because he was there. Because everyone had built it together. A difficult realization. Cedric stopped beside the Eastern District. A former refugee farmer greeted him. My lord. Cedric smiled. You don't have to call me that. The farmer laughed. I know. He looked toward the fields. We heard you were in danger in the capital. Cedric paused. I'm fine. The farmer nodded. Good. Then he said something Cedric hadn't expected. We were worried about you. Cedric smiled. Thank you. The farmer looked at him. Seriously. You protected us when we had nowhere else to go. Now, we want to protect you too. Cedric couldn't answer immediately. The promise. That evening, Cedric climbed the eastern hill overlooking Ashfall. Greta found him there. You've been quiet. Cedric nodded. I've been thinking. About your brothers. About everything. He looked down at the town. I used to think protecting Ashfall meant protecting its walls. Greta listened. Then I realized it meant protecting the people. Cedric looked toward the lights. And now I understand something else. What? The family is part of that too. Greta's concern. Greta frowned. Your brothers? Yes. Even the one who hired criminals. Cedric's expression became serious. Even him. Greta sighed. You're too kind. Maybe. She shook her head. No. You're stubborn. Cedric laughed. That too. A letter from the capital. The following morning, a letter arrived. It was from the eldest brother. Cedric opened it. The situation has worsened. The second has withdrawn from several family agreements. The fourth has increased his military security. The third refuses to share information with either side. The family is no longer united. Cedric continued reading. I don't know how long we can remain this way. At the bottom, there was one final sentence. I need your help. Cedric's response. Cedric didn't immediately write back. Instead, he called the council. I need to return to the capital. Greta immediately shook her head. No. Cedric blinked. No. You just got back. Oswald nodded. And Ashfall still needs you. Cedric looked around. I know. Greta placed her hands on the table. Then don't leave. Cedric frowned. I can't ignore my family. You don't have to. She pointed toward the town. Bring your family here. An unexpected idea. Everyone became silent. Cedric stared at Greta. You want me to invite my brothers to Ashfall? Yes. Oswald considered it. Actually. Cedric looked at him. It might work. How? Oswald explained. The capital is where everyone is watching them. Every meeting becomes political. Every conversation becomes a faction. But here, he gestured toward the council hall. They wouldn't have the same environment. The council agrees. Teacher Elena smiled. They could remember what being brothers feels like. Dr. Miriam nodded. Before they became political figures. Master Rowan crossed his arms. And if they start fighting? Everyone looked at him. What? He shrugged. I'll throw them out. Cedric laughed. For the first time in weeks. The council laughed with him. The invitations. Cedric sent 4 letters. One to each brother. The messages were identical. Come to Ashfall. Not as a noble. Not as a faction leader. Not as a candidate for succession. Come as my brother. We need to talk before we lose each other. The 4th brother arrives. The 4th brother was the first to accept. He arrived 3 days later. Cedric met him personally at the gate. You came. I said I would. Cedric looked at his shoulder. How's the wound? Better. Good. The 4th brother looked around. So this is Ashfall. Cedric smiled. Welcome. Seeing Ashfall. The 4th brother expected a frontier settlement. Instead, he saw a thriving town. Children studying. Farmers working. Merchants trading. Craftsmen building. Refugees living peacefully beside locals. He stared. You really built all this? Cedric nodded. Everyone did. The 4th brother looked at his brother. I understand now. What? Why the king trusts you. The 2nd brother arrives. The 2nd brother came the following day. Unlike his brother, he arrived with a small group of merchant representatives. Cedric met him at the gate. You're supposed to be here as my brother. The 2nd brother looked behind him. The merchants immediately turned around. Fine. He stepped out of the carriage. Cedric smiled. Thank you. The eldest arrives. The eldest brother came next. He traveled without his political advisors. Without the noble families. Without his usual entourage. He entered Ashfall quietly. Cedric greeted him. The eldest looked around. I've heard stories. They were probably exaggerated. The eldest smiled. They weren't. The 3rd brother. The 3rd arrived last. He brought only one assistant. The moment he entered Ashfall, he immediately noticed the town's organization. The council is impressive. Cedric smiled. You should meet them. I'd like that. 4 brothers. That evening, The 5 brothers sat around a table. For the first time in years. There were no advisors, no merchants, no nobles, no knights, no scholars, no political allies, just brothers. The eldest looked at Cedric. You really thought this would work? Cedric smiled. No. The second laughed. At least you're honest. Cedric looked around. But I had to try. The conversation. Cedric placed the criminal network's records on the table. We're being manipulated. The third nodded. I know. The assassination attempt. The fourth's expression hardened. The intimidation campaign. The second looked away. The attacks on Ashfall. The eldest frowned. They're all connected. Cedric nodded. And if we keep fighting, we make their job easier. The second brother confesses. The second brother finally spoke. I hired the criminals. Silence. The fourth immediately stood. You. Cedric raised his hand. Let him finish. The second looked down. I wanted to weaken the eldest's faction. I didn't order anyone to be hurt. But I knew what I was doing was wrong. The eldest stared at him. You could have told me. I couldn't. Why? Because I was afraid of losing. The truth. The second brother's voice became quieter. I spent my entire life believing that if I didn't become powerful, I'd become irrelevant. He looked toward Cedric. Then you came along. Cedric frowned. I never wanted your position. I know. That's what made it worse. The fourth brother speaks. The fourth brother slowly sat down. I was angry too. Everyone looked at him. I thought everyone wanted something from the family. Then I realized. He looked at his brothers. We were all afraid. The third nodded. Afraid of losing. The eldest sighed. Afraid of failing. The second added. Afraid of becoming unnecessary. Cedric looked at them. And afraid of losing each other. The promise. Cedric stood. He looked at each brother. I don't care who becomes the next head of House Valmont. I don't care who gains the most allies. I don't care who wins the political game. His voice became firm. But I will not stand by while our family destroys itself. He placed his hand on the table. And I will protect Ashfall. Both. The brothers looked at him. Ashfall. And House Valmont. The answer. The eldest brother slowly stood. Then I'll help. The third nodded. So will I. The fourth smiled. You won't have to do it alone. Everyone looked toward the second brother. He remained silent. Then, he stood. I don't deserve forgiveness yet. Cedric shook his head. I didn't ask you to forgive yourself. The second looked at him. I'm asking you to stop. He closed his eyes. Then I'll stop. Not forgiveness. Cedric knew the promise didn't erase what happened. The criminals were still out there. The intimidation campaign had already damaged relationships. Political factions still existed. The second brother had crossed a line. The family couldn't simply return to normal. But for the first time, they had chosen not to take another step toward war. A new agreement. The brothers made one temporary agreement. No brother would attack another brother's supporters. No secret criminal operations. No political retaliation. No violence within the family. Any dispute would be discussed directly. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Outside the hall, Greta watched from the doorway. Oswald stood beside her. Do you think it'll work? Greta looked at the 5 brothers. For tonight. Oswald smiled. I'll take it. The final scene. Later that night, Cedric walked his brothers through Ashfall. They saw the marketplace, the school, the clinic, the refugee district, the new farms, the homes, the lights, the life. The second brother looked around. I understand why you fought for this. Cedric smiled. I didn't fight for it. What did you do? Cedric looked at the people. I stayed. The 5 brothers stood together on the eastern hill. For the first time in months. No factions separated them. No political banners stood behind them. Only Ashfall stretched below. But far away, in the capital, a man opened a report. The Valmont brothers have temporarily reunited. He smiled. Then we changed the plan. Another figure asked, do we attack? The man shook his head. No. He looked toward the map of the kingdom. We let them believe they've won. Then he placed a black marker on the map. Directly over the capital. The real battle hasn't started yet. Cedric didn't know about the conversation. He only knew one thing. For now, his brothers were standing beside him. And as long as they were willing to stand together, he would protect them. Even if protecting them meant standing against the entire storm gathering around House Valmont. Chapter 19. The Gathering Storm. For the first time in months, House Valmont appeared united. The 5 brothers had reached an agreement. No secret attacks. No criminal operations. No political retaliation against one another. They would settle their differences without destroying the family. It wasn't perfect. Trust had not magically returned. But it was a beginning. Unfortunately, the rest of the kingdom had already noticed the cracks. And now everyone was choosing what to do about them. The capital reacts. News spread quickly. The Valmont brothers had temporarily reconciled. Some nobles were relieved. Others were disappointed. A few had already invested heavily in one faction or another. The sudden unity threatened carefully planned alliances. One noble house immediately withdrew its support from the eldest brother. Another strengthened its relationship with the second. Several merchant families began approaching the third. Military commanders quietly increased their communication with the fourth. And the nobles who had previously ignored Cedric started watching Ashfall. The problem with peace. Cedric returned to Ashfall with his brothers. For several days, everything seemed peaceful. The brothers walked through the town. They visited the school. They toured the clinic. They inspected the new farms. They even ate together in the marketplace. But Cedric noticed something. People were watching them, not with admiration, with concern. They had heard about the assassination attempt. They had heard about the criminal operation. They knew House Valmont was divided. Cedric understood why. Peace between the brothers didn't automatically make everyone else trust them. The council's concern. Oswald brought Cedric a report. Trade has shifted. Cedric looked up. How? Several merchants who previously supported Ashfall have become cautious. Why? They're afraid of becoming involved in the Valmont conflict. Greta added. Some are delaying contracts. Others are looking for alternative routes. Cedric frowned. So even if we're not fighting, people think we might. Oswald nodded. Exactly. The kingdom is choosing. Across the kingdom, the same thing was happening. Traditional nobles favored stability. Merchant houses wanted economic security. Military leaders wanted stronger defenses. Academics wanted continued reform. Frontier lords wanted protection from growing instability. Everyone had different priorities. And House Valmont was connected to all of them. The family was no longer simply a noble house. It had become a political crossroads. The first alliance. The eldest brother received an invitation from several traditional noble houses. They wanted a formal agreement. Protection of noble privileges. Preservation of old succession customs. Mutual military assistance. He read the proposal carefully. Then refused. His advisor looked surprised. Why? Because if I accept, he placed the document down. They'll expect me to oppose my brothers. The advisor frowned. Isn't that what factions are for? The eldest shook his head. Not anymore. The second alliance. The second brother received a different offer. Several merchant families wanted him to publicly oppose new restrictions on trade monopolies. In return, they promised enormous financial support. He stared at the offer. It was exactly the kind of influence he had wanted. But after what happened with the criminals, he hesitated. Finally, he rejected it. The merchant representative looked shocked. You would refuse this? The second brother answered quietly. I already know what ambition costs. The third brother's discovery. The third brother was less concerned with alliances. He was following information, and what he discovered disturbed him. Several political groups across the kingdom had recently begun exchanging information. Noble factions, merchant organizations, military officers, even foreign traders. At first, they appeared unrelated, but every trail eventually pointed toward the same issue. House Valmont. The third brother immediately sent a message to Cedric. The family is no longer the only group watching us. The fourth brother's report. The fourth brother brought another warning. Military movements had increased near several frontier territories. Not armies. Not yet. Just small deployments. Additional patrols. Weapons shipments. Supply purchases. Cedric studied the report. Why are they preparing? The fourth brother answered. They're afraid. Of what? War. Cedric looked at him. There isn't a war. Not yet. The king's concern. In the capital, the king received reports from across the kingdom. He read them in silence. His advisor stood beside him. Trade routes are changing. The king nodded. Military deployments are increasing. Another nod. Noble houses are forming new alliances. The king placed the report down. And House Valmont. The advisor hesitated. They appeared to have reconciled. The king looked toward the window. Appear. We don't know how long it will last. The king sighed. Neither do I. The royal council. The king summoned his ministers. The room quickly filled with arguments. One minister wanted stronger restrictions on noble alliances. Another wanted increased military patrols. A third wanted economic intervention. A fourth argued that House Valmont should be placed under greater royal supervision. The king listened, then asked, "Has House Valmont broken any law?" "No." "Has any brother openly rebelled?" "No." "Have they attacked one another?" "No." "Then why are we preparing for war?" Nobody answered. The king leaned back. Because everyone thinks everyone else is preparing for war. The dangerous cycle. The king finally understood the problem. One noble house increased its guards. Another saw it and did the same. A merchant family stockpiled grain. Its rivals interpreted that as preparation for shortages. A military commander moved troops. Neighboring territories responded by moving theirs. Nobody wanted war, but everyone was preparing for the possibility. And preparation itself was creating fear. Cedric receives a royal message. A royal messenger arrived in Ashfall. Cedric opened the letter. "Your Majesty requests your presence at the royal council. The matter concerns the stability of the kingdom." Cedric looked at his brothers. The eldest sighed. "Go." The second nodded. "You should hear what the king knows." The third added, "And find out what he suspects." The fourth smiled faintly. "Try not to get dragged into politics." Cedric laughed. "That's becoming impossible." The royal council. Cedric arrived in the capital 2 days later. This time, he wasn't summoned privately. Every major minister was present. Several important nobles had also been invited. Cedric immediately realized how serious the meeting was. The king looked at him. "Lord Cedric, Your Majesty, thank you for coming." Cedric took his seat. The king placed a map on the table. "This is the kingdom." Then he marked several locations. "These are recent military deployments." Another mark. "These are new merchant alliances." Another. "Noble political agreements." Cedric stared at the map. There were dozens. The entire kingdom seemed to be shifting. The question. The king looked directly at him. "Why?" Cedric thought carefully. "Because people are afraid." "Of what?" "Each other." The king nodded. "Exactly." Cedric continued. "House Valmont's conflict may have started it. But it isn't controlling it anymore." The ministers became silent. Cedric pointed toward the map. "Everyone is making decisions based on what they think someone else will do." The king's realization. The king leaned back. "So the storm has already begun." Cedric looked at the map. "No." He paused. "It's gathering." The king studied him. "What's the difference?" Cedric answered. "Once the storm begins, you can see it." He pointed toward the alliances. "Right now, everyone is still pretending the sky is clear." The royal decision. The king immediately ordered several measures. No unauthorized military mobilization. No private armies entering neighboring territories. No merchant blockade without royal approval. No noble house could use royal resources to interfere in another lord's territory. And most importantly, all major political agreements had to be reported to the crown. The ministers protested. The king ignored them. "I will not allow fear to become a war." But the nobles resist. The decree slowed things. It didn't stop them. Some nobles simply became more secretive. Merchant houses began using intermediaries. Military commanders stopped announcing troop movements. Political meetings moved into private residences. The kingdom became quieter. And somehow, that was more frightening. The Valmont brothers meet again. That evening, Cedric returned to the Valmont residence. His brothers were waiting. He explained everything. The eldest listened carefully. "The king thinks we're approaching a crisis." Cedric nodded. The second sighed. "He's right." The third added. "The crisis is larger than House Valmont now." The fourth looked toward the window. "Then what do we do?" Cedric answered. "Stay together." A new understanding. The brothers looked at one another. The eldest spoke first. "We can't stop every faction in the kingdom." "No." "We can't control what nobles do." "No." "We can't control merchants." "No." The second brother looked at Cedric. "Then what can we control?" Cedric smiled. "Us." A family agreement. They made a second agreement. This time, it went beyond House Valmont. They would not allow their supporters to attack one another. They would discourage their allies from escalating political conflicts. They would communicate with one another before making major decisions. And if someone tried to use House Valmont to destabilize the kingdom, they would stand together, not as rivals, as brothers. But someone wasn't listening. Far away, a secret meeting was taking place. Several nobles sat around a table. A merchant representative stood beside them. A military officer listened from the shadows. One noble placed a document on the table. The Valmont brothers have reunited. Another frowned. Then the opportunity is gone. The merchant shook his head. No, he smiled. Their unity is exactly what we need. Everyone looked at him. He continued. If they stand together, then whatever happens next will affect all of them. The final warning. That same night, the king stood alone on the palace balcony. His advisor joined him. Your Majesty. Yes. Do you believe House Valmont will survive this? The king looked toward the distant horizon. I don't know. And the kingdom? The king was silent. Then, if House Valmont falls, he looked at the lights of the capital. The kingdom may fall with it. The gathering storm. In Ashfall, Cedric stood on the eastern hill. His brothers stood nearby. Below them, the town was peaceful. Lanterns glowed. Children laughed. Farmers returned home. The school bell rang. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Cedric looked toward the distant horizon. Dark clouds were gathering. Not above Ashfall. Beyond it, across the kingdom, the storm was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be enough to protect one town. Cedric would have to protect the people he loved, while trying to keep an entire family from becoming the spark that set the kingdom ablaze. Chapter 20, Brothers at the Crossroads. The kingdom had gone quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet. There was a difference. Noble houses were forming alliances behind closed doors. Merchant guilds were shifting their investments. Military commanders were repositioning troops. The royal council was watching everyone. And House Valmont stood at the center of it all. For the first time, the five brothers understood that the choices they made would no longer affect only their family. They could affect the entire kingdom. The king's ultimatum. Cedric was summoned to the palace early that morning. The king stood beside a large map. Several areas had been marked. The situation has become worse. Cedric studied the map. How bad? 3 noble coalitions have formed. 2 merchant alliances are refusing to cooperate with each other. Several military commanders have requested permission to mobilize. Cedric frowned. Why? The king looked at him. Because they believe House Valmont is about to fracture. Cedric remained silent. The king continued. If your family openly turns against itself, the kingdom will choose sides. Cedric understood immediately. And then, the king looked toward the map. Then we may no longer be able to stop what follows. The final warning. The king approached Cedric. I am giving you one opportunity. Cedric looked at him. To do what? Keep your family together. Cedric smiled bitterly. That's quite a responsibility. I know. And if we fail, the king's expression became solemn. Then I will have no choice but to intervene. Cedric understood what that meant. Royal intervention. The crown could strip privileges, seize assets, dismiss officials, even place House Valmont under direct royal control. Cedric nodded. I understand. The brothers gather. That evening, the 5 brothers gathered in the Valmont estate. No advisors, no servants, no political representatives, only family. Cedric placed the king's warning on the table. The kingdom is preparing for us to fight. The eldest brother sighed. Of course it is. The second looked away. They think we're already enemies. The third studied the reports. Some people want us to become enemies. The fourth clenched his fist. Then we shouldn't give them what they want. Cedric nodded. Exactly. The choice. The eldest brother stood. I'll withdraw my formal alliance with the traditional nobles. The second looked at him. Why? Because they expect me to use their support against you. He looked toward his brothers. I'm not doing that. The second brother was silent. Then he slowly nodded. I'll do the same. Cedric looked at him. Your merchant alliance. Yes. I'm not giving them permission to turn House Valmont into their political weapon. The third brother's decision. The third brother placed several documents on the table. I've been collecting information on the factions. The fourth frowned. How much? Enough. The third hesitated, then pushed the documents toward the center. I'm going to release the information to the king. Everyone looked at him. The second brother immediately understood. Even if it exposes our family. Yes. The third looked at them. If the crown doesn't know what these factions are doing, they'll keep manipulating the situation. The eldest nodded. Do it. The fourth brother's choice. The fourth brother removed the military insignia from his coat. I'll order my knights to stand down. Cedric frowned. All of them. From political activity. The fourth placed the insignia on the table. They're here to protect people, not choose which brother wins. Cedric smiled. That's the right choice. The fourth brother looked at him. I learned from you. The second brother's confession. There was still one matter left. The second brother looked toward Cedric. I need to deal with something. He told them everything. The criminal network. The threats against merchants. The advisor. The payments. The intimidation. The others listened silently. When he finished, the eldest brother asked, "Where is the advisor?" "I don't know." The third brother immediately responded, "I can find him." The second shook his head. "No." Everyone looked at him. "I'll turn myself into the king." Cedric's expression changed. "You don't have to do that alone." The second smiled faintly. "I caused it. Then I should be the one to answer for it. The consequence." The next morning, the second brother appeared before the king. He confessed. Not everything could be undone. The king was furious. "You hired criminals." "Yes." "You endangered merchants." "Yes." "You nearly created a criminal war inside your own family." The second lowered his head. "Yes." The king stared at him for a long time. Then asked, "Why?" The second brother answered honestly. "Because I was afraid of losing." The king sighed. "Ambition is not a crime. But what you did with it was." The second nodded. "I understand." The king's judgment. The king did not imprison him. But he imposed conditions. The second brother would personally compensate the merchants who had been threatened. He would dismiss every advisor connected to the operation. He would cooperate with the investigation into the criminal network. And he would publicly withdraw his political alliance. The second accepted everything. Before leaving, the king told him, "Remember this." The second looked back. Power isn't measured by how many people you can force to follow you. It is measured by how many people still trust you after you admit you were wrong. The criminal network. With the second brother cooperating, the investigation accelerated. Several intermediaries were arrested. Merchant accounts were frozen. Secret contracts were uncovered. The Black Ledger network began collapsing. But one mystery remained. Who had originally manipulated the Valmont conflict? The evidence pointed towards several noble houses. But none could be definitively identified as the mastermind. The investigation would continue. The political shock. The kingdom reacted immediately. The Valmont brothers had done something almost unheard of. Instead of using their political factions, they had dismantled them. The traditional nobles lost their expected champion. The merchants lost their political leverage. The military lost its excuse to mobilize. The king regained control of the situation. And Ashfall remained independent. The final gathering. Several weeks later, the brothers returned to Ashfall. Cedric brought them to the eastern hill. The town stretched beneath them. Green fields, new houses, the school, the clinic, the marketplace, the refugee district, everything they had been fighting around. The eldest looked over the town. "I understand now." Cedric smiled. "Understand what?" "Why you refused to choose a side." Cedric looked at his brothers. There was never supposed to be sides. 5 brothers. The second brother stood beside them. "I thought power was something you had to take." He looked at Ashfall. "Maybe it's something you build." The third smiled. "I thought information made people powerful." He looked toward Cedric. "Sometimes knowing when not to use it matters more." The fourth crossed his arms. "I thought strength meant being able to defeat someone." He looked at his brothers. "Now I think it's being able to protect them without controlling them." The eldest remained quiet, then said, "And I thought being the eldest meant carrying the family alone." He smiled. "Apparently I was wrong." Cedric's answer. They all looked at Cedric. "What about you?" Cedric thought for a moment. "I just wanted a quiet life." Everyone laughed. The eldest shook his head. "You chose the wrong family." Cedric smiled. "Apparently." The unfinished storm. Their peace wasn't perfect. The second brother still had to rebuild his reputation. The eldest still had political responsibilities. The third continued investigating the remaining conspirators. The fourth continued protecting the family. Cedric still had Ashfall. And the kingdom still had enemies. Nothing had been completely solved. But something important had changed. The brothers had finally chosen their family over their ambition. Across the kingdom, the king's decree followed soon after. Political factions connected to House Valmont were ordered to disband. Military forces returned to their territories. Merchant alliances were reviewed. The crown strengthened oversight of noble conflicts. The kingdom slowly began to calm. But not everyone was satisfied. Some nobles had lost opportunities. Some merchants had lost influence. And somewhere, someone was still watching. The unseen observer. In a distant manner, a man read the final report. The Valmont brothers have reconciled. He folded the paper. Interesting. A servant stood nearby. Should we abandon the operation? The man smiled. No, but the family is united. Exactly. He looked toward a map of the kingdom. Their unity makes them stronger. He placed a mark beside Ashfall. And stronger enemies are more interesting. The last night of Volume 4. That evening, Ashfall held another celebration. Not for victory. Not for politics. Simply because life had continued. The brothers sat together at a long table. No titles. No advisors. No factions. Just family. Cedric looked around. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Then the town bells rang. Children laughed. Lanterns filled the streets. The 5 brothers raised their glasses. To family. To Ashfall. And to surviving another disaster. Everyone laughed. But Cedric looked toward the horizon. Beyond the lights of Ashfall, dark clouds remained. The kingdom had calmed, but the storm had not disappeared. It had simply moved farther away. Cedric knew there would be more challenges. More political games. More enemies. More secrets. And perhaps, a greater threat than anything they had faced before. But this time, he wouldn't face it alone. His brothers stood beside him. His people stood behind him. And Ashfall had become something much more than a territory. It had become home. Cedric smiled. Whatever comes next, he looked at his brothers. We face it together. The 5 brothers stood beneath the night sky. For now, there would be no civil war. No bloodshed between them. No throne worth destroying their family for. But the choices they had made could not be undone. The kingdom had changed. House Valmont had changed. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the next storm was already forming. End of Volume 4. Thank you for listening to II Fiction Stories. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. See you next time.